A captivating journey beckons, inviting exploration into the heart of ancient Greece. This expedition promises a gentle drift through the winding paths and forgotten corners of a bygone era. The narrative will meticulously trace the soft footsteps of Hermes, the agile messenger god, whose winged sandals carried him across every terrain, transporting readers to the quiet sanctity of ancient temples, the serene mystery of peaceful mountain caves, and the very dusty roads where weary travellers once humbly paused, leaving their devout offerings at unassuming stone markers. As the modern world recedes, one might find solace in the fading light, perhaps drawing a comforting blanket closer, allowing the cacophony of daily life to dissipate, much like the ephemeral morning mist that gracefully vanishes over the sun-drenched Mediterranean hills, sets the stage for a deeper immersion into antiquity. With the ambient lighting suitably subdued, and perhaps a subtle rhythmic hum providing a gentle backdrop, the moment is ripe for commencing an introspective journey. This particular exploration promises a captivating walk through the intricate and often surprising tales of the deity renowned as the most cunning and resourceful in the entirety of the Greek pantheon. In the hushed stillness of the pre-dawn hours when the ancient Greek world lay slumbering, softly enveloped in the ethereal grey light that precedes the sun's grand ascent, an astute observer might have perceived an anomaly traversing the heavens. It was an entity neither avian nor ethereal cloud, but something far more intriguing. With a keen eye and unwavering focus, one could discern the fleeting image of a youthful figure, effortlessly gliding through the air, his feet appearing to brush the verdant crowns of olive trees, adorned with what seemed to be delicate miniature wings affixed to his sandals. This remarkable individual was none other than Hermes, and even amidst the profound quietude of those early morning moments, while the vast majority of the world remained in repose, he was already diligently engaged in the demanding tasks of his day. Indeed, the esteemed role of divine messenger was far from a leisurely occupation, demanding unparalleled swiftness and unwavering dedication. When Zeus, the omnipotent sovereign of all deities, conceived a pronouncement of paramount importance, its dissemination required immediate execution. Similarly, should Hera, the venerable queen of the gods, wish to transmit tidings to her sister goddesses, it was invariably Hermes who undertook the crucial delivery. In essence, whenever any of the august inhabitants of Mount Olympus necessitated an action or intervention within the mortal realm below, their collective summons invariably resonated for Hermes, underscoring his indispensable role in the divine hierarchy. Yet a fundamental distinction truly set Hermes apart from his formidable Olympian brethren. While Zeus commanded the heavens with thunderous lightning bolts, and Poseidon unleashed the tempestuous fury of the seas, and while Athena meticulously strategized grand military campaigns, and Apollo composed verses of exquisite beauty, Hermes approached challenges with an entirely different, often more subtle, yet profoundly effective instrument, his unparalleled ingenuity and sharp wit. To fully grasp the essence of Hermes' unique approach, one might vividly envision a quintessential morning scene unfolding across the landscape of ancient Greece. The nascent sun, a golden orb ascending, had just commenced its daily ritual of imparting warmth upon the resplendent marble steps of a temple consecrated to the mighty Zeus. Within this sacred precinct, a priest robed in unadorned white moved with deliberate grace, meticulously ensuring every detail was impeccably arranged for the day's forthcoming ceremonies. The venerable olive trees, their silvery leaves shimmering, offered a gentle rustle in the nascent morning breeze, while from a pastoral distance the faint, melodic bleating of goats being guided to their grazing grounds softly punctuated the serene silence. However, the priest's methodical inspection was suddenly interrupted by an unexpected and peculiar sight. There, reposed upon the sacred temple steps, in an attitude of complete ease and utterly devoid of any semblance of intrusion, sat a young man, an unfamiliar countenance to the priest. This enigmatic stranger was clad in a simple, unadorned tunic, and his head was adorned with a distinctive cap, its design reminiscent of delicate feathers. Most strikingly, and indeed most unusually, his sandals were equipped with what appeared to be small, finely crafted wings, hinting at an origin beyond the mundane. At this juncture one might reasonably anticipate the priest to react with alarm or apprehension. After all, these temples represented solemn sanctuaries, and the casual presence of an unknown individual, making himself at home on consecrated ground, was highly irregular. Yet, contrary to such expectations, the priest found himself enveloped in an inexplicable sense of tranquillity. The young man possessed a particular kind of captivating smile, one that effortlessly inspired immediate trust, even in the absence of a clear rationale. A melodious greeting emanated from the stranger, his voice possessing a captivating musical quality that harmonized perfectly with the soft whisper of the morning breeze as it stirred through the ancient olive trees. "I trust my presence here does not cause any inconvenience," the young man stated, "for I bear a direct message intended for you, originating from none other than Zeus, the sovereign of the gods." The priest's eyes, wide with astonishment and reverence, reflected the profound impact of this declaration. Direct communications from Zeus were exceedingly rare, a privilege almost unheard of indeed. The majority of priests dedicated their entire lives to service, without ever being graced by such a personal divine intervention from the king of the gods. A message. The priest inquired, his voice hushed to a barely audible whisper tinged with disbelief and awe. With a subtle nod, Hermes extended his hand towards a small, inconspicuous satchel that had previously escaped the priest's notice. From within he produced a scroll that seemed to emanate a faint, ethereal shimmer under the nascent morning light, hinting at its divine provenance. "Zeus wishes to convey his profound satisfaction with the meticulous care you have bestowed upon his sacred temple," Hermes declared, "particularly acknowledging your diligent efforts in maintaining the purity of the olive oil in the lamps, and the unwavering dedication with which you sweep the temple steps each morning. A profound warmth, a palpable surge of happiness permeated the priest's being, spreading through his chest. While it was undeniably true that he derived immense pride from the meticulous upkeep of the temple, the notion that Zeus himself, the Olympian sovereign, had taken notice of his humble yet dedicated efforts had never crossed his wildest imaginings. However, Hermes's demeanour subtly shifted, his tone adopting a more sombre and cautionary gravity. "Zeus also deems it imperative to issue a warning concerning a matter of potential deception," he continued. "A certain merchant is slated to visit the temple later this very day. This individual will attempt to peddle what he purports to be a sacred effigy of Zeus, ostensibly sculpted by the most revered artisans in all of Athens. The priest, now fully engrossed, leaned forward, his attention rapt. Hermes elucidated further. While the statue itself may possess a certain aesthetic appeal, and the merchant's accompanying narrative will undoubtedly prove highly persuasive, Zeus wishes you to understand that this artifact is, in truth, merely common marble, fashioned by the merchant's brother-in-law. Though a competent craftsman in his own right, this relative is assuredly not counted among Athens's most distinguished artistic talents. The merchant's true intention is to cunningly defraud you into paying a sum far exceeding the statue's actual value. It is at this pivotal juncture that the unparalleled ingenuity and profound cleverness of Hermes truly come to the fore, revealing the depths of his strategic brilliance. Unbeknownst to the earnest priest, the divine missive concerning the deceitful merchant was, in its entirety, a fabrication, a meticulously crafted narrative by Hermes himself. However, Hermes, omniscient in his travels across the entirety of Greece, possessed an unwavering awareness of every unfolding event. He knew with absolute certainty that a genuinely dishonest merchant was indeed poised to visit the temple later that day, intent on presenting a fraudulent tale about a sacred statue. How could Hermes possess such precise foresight? As the tireless messenger god, his omnipresent journeys across the land allowed him to observe and absorb every detail, every whisper of human endeavour. Only the previous day, while momentarily resting beneath the shade of a venerable fig tree, approximately 20 meters distant, he had inadvertently overheard the merchant meticulously rehearsing his elaborate, deceptive sales pitch. Hermes harboured a deep-seated affection and respect for individuals of integrity and diligent work ethic, much like this devoted priest, and the very notion of such an honest soul being unjustly defrauded was utterly intolerable to him. Consequently, Hermes ingeniously devised a minor, utterly harmless untruth, a fabricated message from Zeus, specifically to shield the priest from a far more insidious and financially damaging deception concerning the purported sacred statue. This was precisely the calibre of sagacious and resourceful thinking that cemented Hermes' legendary status across the breadth of ancient Greece. He possessed a profound understanding that, on occasion, the most effective counter to dishonesty was not direct confrontation, but rather a carefully calibrated form of alternative truthfulness, one designed not to exploit, but rather to safeguard and champion the welfare of virtuous individuals. Overwhelmed with gratitude and relief, the priest expressed his profound thanks to Hermes for delivering such a crucial message. Hermes, in response, offered a knowing, gentle smile and subtly tipped his distinctive feathered cap. "Merely part of the day's routine," he replied with an understated ease, his voice carrying a light-hearted cadence. He then took a few deliberate steps away from the hallowed temple grounds, and the priest watched in utter astonishment as the diminutive wings affixed to Hermes' sandals began to stir, then flutter with increasing vigour. Within mere moments, the divine messenger was airborne, ascending gracefully and soaring away over the verdant expanse of the olive groves, already charting a course towards his next undisclosed destination, his journey seemingly without end. As predicted, later that very afternoon a merchant indeed arrived at the temple, his cart laden with an object he confidently proclaimed to be a sacred statue of Zeus. The priest, exhibiting impeccable decorum, listened attentively and courteously to the merchant's convoluted and elaborate narrative, replete with mentions of renowned Athenian sculptors and the purported sanctity of the marble. However, fortified by Hermes' timely and insightful warning, the priest remained entirely unswayed, his discernment unclouded by the deception. With unwavering politeness, he declined the offer to purchase the statue, leaving the merchant utterly frustrated and compelled to seek more susceptible patrons elsewhere. As evening descended and the priest meticulously illuminated the oil lamps within the temple, preparing the sanctuary for the encroaching night, his thoughts inevitably returned to his remarkable encounter with Hermes. There was an undeniable, almost mystical quality to the messenger god's appearance, his timely arrival coinciding precisely with the moment his assistance was most crucially required. The priest, in his earnestness, did not fully comprehend the broader pattern, but this form of impeccably timed, discreet intervention was, in fact, entirely characteristic of Hermes' unique and often subtle methodology for aiding mortals. Fundamentally, Hermes possessed an extraordinary innate talent for discerning the true nature of individuals. With a mere glance, he could penetrate the superficial veneer, instantly grasping the core character of a person. He effortlessly distinguished between virtuous priests and duplicitous merchants, between benevolent shopkeepers and tyrannical tax collectors, between magnanimous farmers and avaricious landowners. This profound understanding of human nature served as the bedrock for his decisions, guiding him on when to extend his benevolent aid, and equally when to employ his characteristic trickery upon those whose conduct warranted such a comeuppance. Yet the boundless ingenuity of Hermes extended far beyond merely resolving the predicaments of others. He was universally celebrated across the ancient world for the extraordinarily creative and often audacious methods he employed to extricate himself from even the most precarious circumstances. Consider, for instance, a critical occasion when he was tasked with delivering an urgent message to Hera, Zeus's formidable consort. Aware of Hera's volatile temper and her current pique with Zeus, a state that often led her to vent her frustrations upon the unfortunate messenger, Hermes devised an elaborate ruse. He assumed the guise of an unassuming elderly flower seller, approaching Hera's temple with a basket overflowing with the most exquisite, breathtaking roses ever beheld. Upon catching sight of the resplendent blossoms, Hera's renowned appreciation for beauty immediately drew her interest, and she expressed a keen desire to acquire some for her sacred sanctuary. As she meticulously selected the choicest roses, engaging in pleasant conversation with the disguised Hermes about the optimal techniques for preserving the freshness of cut flowers, he deftly and nonchalantly interjected a seemingly incidental remark that he had overheard an intriguing piece of news regarding Zeus's latest benevolent plan for assisting mortals. By the time Hera fully registered that she had, in fact, received Zeus's intended message, her disposition had been so thoroughly brightened by the sheer beauty and fragrance of the roses that her earlier anger had completely dissipated. This incident perfectly encapsulated the essence of Hermes' genius, resolving a complex problem in a manner that invariably left all parties involved in a more amiable state than before. He intuitively grasped that the most masterful deceptions were not those that left individuals feeling foolish or exploited, but rather those subtle stratagems that, in some unforeseen way, subtly improved the quality of life for everyone involved. as the shroud of night gracefully descends upon ancient Greece, and the last vestiges of light from flickering oil lamps illuminate temples and humble abodes across the land, one might find themselves pondering the myriad other discreet acts of cleverness Hermes surely performed under the cloak of darkness. What other nefarious schemes of dishonest merchants did he ingeniously thwart? What additional diligent and hard-working priests did he subtly safeguard from harm or deception? What further brilliantly creative solutions did he meticulously devise for predicaments that, to mere mortals, appeared utterly insurmountable? The fervent belief among the ancient Greeks was that Hermes, the tireless divine messenger, never truly succumbed to slumber. They held that even during the profoundest hours of night he was perpetually active somewhere in the vast expanse of the world, employing his unmatched wit and profound wisdom to incrementally improve circumstances for those deemed worthy of his invaluable assistance. And perhaps as one drifts towards the precipice of sleep this very night, a gentle, almost imperceptible sound might echo in the imagination, the soft, rhythmic rustle of winged sandals passing high overhead, carrying their sagacious wearer towards yet another quiet, yet profoundly significant adventure. The astute messenger god, whose exploits we recounted in the preceding narrative, did not always embody the seasoned problem-solver, soaring with effortless grace above verdant olive groves. Like all nascent beings, even those of divine lineage, Hermes commenced his journey from a point of origin, and remarkably his inaugural act of cunning manifested when he was but an infant, not yet having completed a single day of existence. Envision the tranquil grotto nestled within Mount Selene, the hallowed birthplace of Hermes, born to his mother, the ethereal nymph Maia. This cavern was discreetly ensconced in a hushed recess of the mountain, enveloped by wild botanical treasures that imbued the atmosphere with the delicate perfumes of thyme and oregano. Internally, the cave offered surprising comfort, with plush animal furs meticulously arranged across the rugged stone floor and a modest fire crackling near the entrance, its lively flames casting an intricate ballet of shadows upon the rock-hewn walls. Maia had deliberately selected this concealed sanctuary, driven by her desire for seclusion while nurturing her extraordinary progeny. It was widely known that Zeus was Hermes's paternal figure, and Maia was acutely aware of Hera's considerable displeasure concerning Zeus's offspring born of other mothers. Consequently, the remote mountain grotto appeared to be the quintessential setting for a serene and undisturbed childhood. However, what Maia could not have anticipated was the decidedly unquiet nature of Hermes. Upon awakening in her snug cavern, Maia fully expected to discover her infant son reposing peacefully within the soft, carefully prepared nest of blankets. Instead, her gaze met an empty space. The blankets lay undisturbed, yet the baby was conspicuously absent, leaving no trace of his presence anywhere within the dwelling. One might naturally assume that Maia would succumb to panic. After all, her son had been alive for less than 24 hours, and the treacherous mountainside teemed with predatory wildlife and precipitous cliffs. Yet, as she stood at the cave's opening, surveying the ethereal, mist-shrouded morning landscape, a faint smile began to grace Maia's lips. She was, fundamentally, a nymph, endowed with an innate repertoire of magical faculties, and what these inherent abilities were conveying to her was not an impression of danger for her precious child. Quite the contrary, in fact, he appeared to be revelling in the grand adventure of his young life. Simultaneously, approximately 50 miles distant, Apollo, the resplendent deity of the sun and patron of music, was embarking upon his day with a customary and altogether pleasant morning ritual. Apollo maintained a magnificent herd of sacred cattle within a breathtaking meadow situated near the historic town of Pylos. These were no mere bovine creatures. They were divine livestock, possessing coats of immaculate white and majestic golden horns that shimmered effulgently under the sun's benevolent gaze. Each morning Apollo would conscientiously visit this pastoral expanse to inspect his cherished herd, meticulously counting every animal and ensuring their robust health and contented disposition. The meadow itself, where Apollo pastured his cattle, was a truly spectacular tableau. One could readily envision gently undulating green hills adorned with a vibrant tapestry of wildflowers, a crystal-clear stream meandering through its heart, and venerable ancient oak trees providing ideal, expansive shade for the animals during the sweltering afternoon hours. The grass perpetually retained its perfect emerald hue, the water consistently flowed with pristine clarity, and the cattle themselves seemed to radiate an intrinsic luminosity, a visible manifestation of their celestial essence. On this specific morning, however, Apollo's arrival at his beloved meadow was met with an utterly perplexing sight. The cattle were gone, every single one of them. Where there should have been 50 magnificent white cows, serenely grazing beneath the morning sun, there was nothing but an expanse of empty grass, and a smattering of very bewildered-looking butterflies flitting about. Apollo stood motionless at the periphery of his pasture, striving to comprehend the inexplicable void before him. Cattle, particularly divine ones, do not simply vanish into thin air. They possess no wings to take flight, nor are they of a size to effectively conceal themselves behind the grand oak trees. And yet there was an absolute and undeniable absence of any trace of them. Then Apollo's keen eye discerned something peculiar about the ground in the vicinity of the meandering stream. There were indeed footprints, yet they were unlike any he had ever encountered. While they bore the undeniable impression of cattle hooves, their orientation was fundamentally incorrect. Instead of pointing away from the meadow, as would be logically expected of animals departing the area, these hoofprints appeared to be directed towards the meadow, creating the distinct illusion that the cattle had somehow traversed backward out of their grazing enclosure. Now, Apollo was not a deity easily deceived. As one of the most intellectually acute gods residing on Mount Olympus, he instantaneously comprehended that someone had deliberately orchestrated a stratagem to confound him by compelling the cattle to walk in reverse. This ingenious deception was intended to make their tracks suggest an arrival into the meadow rather than a departure. But who would possess such audacious temerity to pilfer from a god? And more significantly, who would be clever enough to conceive of such an extraordinarily unconventional method to mask the transgression? Apollo embarked on a relentless pursuit, following the enigmatic backward hoofprints for several miles, traversing dense forests and flowing streams, ascending rolling hills and descending into verdant valleys. The meandering trail led him progressively farther from his cherished meadow, winding its way through some of the most secluded and exquisitely beautiful regions of ancient Greece. Along his investigative journey, he encountered shepherds diligently tending their flocks, farmers toiling in their sun-drenched fields, and wayfarers traversing dusty pathways. Apollo meticulously questioned every individual he encountered, inquiring if they had witnessed anything out of the ordinary. Perhaps a herd of pristine white cattle being led by a conspicuously suspicious figure. Yet, what proved most astonishing was the uniformity of the responses. Everyone Apollo conversed with provided essentially the same account. Yes, they had indeed seen the cattle. The animals had unequivocally passed by, and quite recently too. However, when Apollo pressed for details concerning the individual leading them, he received the most peculiar and consistent replies. "Oh yes," affirmed an aged shepherd, thoughtfully stroking his beard. "I observed the cattle with perfect clarity, magnificent creatures. But the most perplexing aspect was that they seemed to be following a baby." "A baby," Apollo echoed, convinced that he must have misheard such an improbable statement. "That is correct," the shepherd confirmed with a nod. "Just a tiny child. Could not have been more than a single day old, yet walking along with an air of absolute confidence, with 50 head of cattle trailing behind him as if he were their own mother." Apollo garnered remarkably similar reports from every other person he questioned along the winding trail. A farmer's wife solemnly swore she had witnessed an infant expertly herding the cattle, wielding a makeshift staff he had fashioned from a simple reed. A contingent of travelling merchants adamantly insisted they had observed a baby, somehow persuading an entire herd of cows to walk backward. Each successive story was more inherently impossible than the last, yet they all maintained an astonishing degree of consistency. The elusive trail eventually guided Apollo to the very base of Mount Selene, where the backward hoof-prints abruptly vanished into a rugged, rocky expanse, where tracks became utterly impossible to discern. Nevertheless, Apollo's diligent detective work had furnished him with sufficient clues to formulate an educated hypothesis regarding the whereabouts of his stolen cattle. If a baby was indeed responsible for this audacious theft, and Apollo was beginning to entertain the notion that such an improbable scenario might actually be true, then that infant must reside somewhere in the immediate vicinity. Apollo commenced a meticulous search of the mountainside, scrutinizing every cave and potential hiding place where someone might conceal a herd of purloined cattle. It was not long before he discovered a secluded, narrow valley, artfully hidden behind a dense screen of pine trees, and within that tranquil valley, grazing peacefully as if they had always belonged there, were his 50 sacred cattle. Yet there remained no sign of the mysterious infant thief. Apollo dedicated the greater portion of the afternoon to an exhaustive search, meticulously exploring every cave and crevice within the region. Finally, just as the golden orb of the sun was beginning its descent, he stumbled upon a cosy grotto situated higher up on the mountainside. A warm, inviting light flickered from its entrance, and Apollo could distinctly perceive the gentle melodic sound of someone softly humming a lullaby. Inside the cavern, Apollo discovered Maia seated beside a small, comforting fire, tenderly cradling what appeared to be an utterly ordinary, perfectly innocent baby. The infant was snugly enfolded in soft blankets, his eyes peacefully closed, and he seemed to be sleeping with the profound tranquillity of any newborn child in the world. "Excuse me," Apollo began politely, his voice carefully modulated. "I am in search of an individual who has stolen my cattle. Several people have informed me that they witnessed a baby leading my herd away from its pasture." Maia looked up. her expression a sweet, surprised countenance, the kind mothers often display when they believe someone has uttered something quite ludicrous about their offspring. A baby, she chuckled softly, a gentle, disbelieving sound. Sir, I truly believe you must be mistaken. My son was born only yesterday. Look at him. He can barely manage to lift his own head, let alone orchestrate the theft of an entire herd of cattle. And indeed the infant nestled in Maya's arms presented an appearance of complete incapability for any form of mischief. His tiny fists were curled delicately near his face, and he emitted the soft rhythmic breathing sounds characteristic of sleeping infants. Apollo began to entertain the unsettling thought that he had perhaps made some grave error in judgment. But then, just as Apollo was on the verge of offering an apology for his intrusion and preparing to depart, the baby's left eye flickered open, and he delivered an unmistakable wink. It was such a swift, subtle gesture that Apollo very nearly missed it. Yet there was no denying the clear implication of what he had witnessed. This seemingly innocent infant had just winked at him with the self-assured confidence of someone who had successfully executed an elaborate practical joke and was thoroughly pleased with his own ingenuity. All right, Apollo conceded, struggling to suppress a smile that threatened to break through his serious demeanour. I acknowledge that you took my cattle. The pertinent question now is, what are your intentions regarding their return? At this precise juncture, baby Hermes evidently determined that the charade had run its course. He abruptly sat upright in his blankets, suddenly appearing far more alert and aware than any day-old infant had a right to be, and offered Apollo a grin that was pure, unadulterated mischief. Your cattle are perfectly safe, Hermes declared, and his voice, though still high-pitched and childlike, possessed an unmistakable undertone of profound pride. I have been diligently taking excellent care of them. They are well fed, thoroughly watered, and I strongly suspect they rather enjoyed their little adventure. Maya gazed at her infant son, a profound astonishment etched upon her countenance. While she had always perceived within him an extraordinary essence, she had certainly not anticipated such an early onset of articulate speech, nor indeed the audacious act of livestock pilfering. Across from them, Apollo himself found his composure genuinely unsettled, replaced by a profound respect. That manoeuvre with the reversed hoof-prints was truly a stroke of genius, he conceded, a note of admiration in his voice. I have never before encountered such a stratagem. How precisely did you manage to persuade the bovine creatures to walk in such an unnatural fashion? Hermes, the subject of this unexpected commendation, visibly swelled with gratification. I fashioned diminutive coverings for their cloven feet, he elucidated, his tone brimming with a youthful pride. These were designed to resemble natural hooves, yet they were affixed in the opposite direction. Consequently, as the cattle moved forward, their tracks deceptively indicated that they were proceeding in the inverse course. The sheer inventiveness and intricate execution of this scheme were so remarkable that Apollo found himself utterly captivated, unable to suppress his admiration, even though, by all accounts, he was the aggrieved party in this audacious larceny. Here stood an infant, barely a day old, who had not only succeeded in absconding with divine cattle, but had accomplished it with a level of creative cunning and strategic brilliance that far surpassed the capabilities of most seasoned adult malefactors. Well, Apollo declared at length, a wry smile playing on his lips, "I must confess that undoubtedly stands as the most impressive cattle theft chronicled in the annals of history. Nevertheless, I am rather keen to have my cows return to their rightful pasture." Naturally, Hermes assented with an unhesitating readiness. It was always my intention to restore them. My sole purpose was to ascertain whether such a feat was within my power to achieve. And so, as the celestial bodies began their luminous emergence in the deepening twilight sky above the majestic slopes of Mount Selene, Apollo and the mere day-old Hermes commenced their journey together, descending into the secluded valley where the hallowed cattle awaited. The cows themselves appeared utterly untroubled, exhibiting no signs of distress or trauma from their recent escapade. Indeed, if anything, they seemed rather pleased with their involvement, as if they too had relished being unwitting participants in such a remarkably elaborate deception. As Apollo prepared to guide his cherished herd back to their accustomed grazing lands, his mind dwelled upon the truly extraordinary infant he had just encountered. This was a prodigious child who, at an age barely beyond his birth, had already evinced a degree of cleverness and imaginative prowess that often eludes individuals throughout an entire lifetime. Perhaps, Apollo mused inwardly as he observed Hermes offer a tiny wave from the secure embrace of his mother's arms, this will not be the final occasion upon which our destinies intertwine. A powerful intuition whispered to him that a baby capable of orchestrating such a sophisticated prank was indisputably destined for unparalleled accomplishments. And as you, the reader, settle into the tranquillity of your own evening hours, you might well conjure an image of the infant Hermes, now nestled back within the warmth of his cosy grotto, finally succumbing to a profound slumber after his inaugural grand adventure. Beside him, his mother Maya would undoubtedly be seated, her thoughts consumed by a wondrous speculation, pondering what astonishing feat her remarkable son would conceive of next. The prodigious infant trickster we last envisioned, peacefully reposing within his mountain sanctuary, did not, in fact, remain secluded on Mount Selene for an extended period. News of Hermes' audacious cattle-rustling exploit possessed an inherent velocity, swiftly disseminating throughout the divine pantheon. Consequently, it was but a matter of a few short days before Zeus himself resolved that he must personally meet this truly exceptional child. Mount Selene, in those ancient days, presented a vista of unparalleled serenity and natural splendor. One might easily imagine its expansive slopes, carpeted luxuriantly with wild lavender and fragrant rosemary, where the ethereal morning mist tenderly embraced the gnarled branches of ancient pine trees. The only audible sounds were the distant melodious chime of goat bells and the gentle, almost imperceptible murmur of the wind as it rustled through the aromatic herbs. Maya's secluded cave was situated high on the mountainside, strategically positioned to capture the very first golden shafts of sunrise each morning and the lingering, burnished glow of the evening light. Within the confines of the cave, the 3-day-old Hermes was already demonstrating unequivocal signs that he was anything but an ordinary babe. While most infants of his tender age were content to merely sleep and partake of their mother's milk, Hermes dedicated his waking hours to meticulously observing everything in his surroundings with an intense and unquenchable curiosity. He would recline amidst his soft, comforting blankets, his gaze intently following the ephemeral dance of shadows cast upon the cave walls, his ears attuned to the myriad sounds of birdsong emanating from outside. One could almost palpably discern his diminutive mind diligently at work, assiduously processing every fragment of information and meticulously storing it away for future application. Maya, for her part, had spent these 3 days immersed in a state of quiet wonder, marvelling at the astonishing rapidity of her son's development. On the 2nd day of his nascent existence, she had discovered him seated perfectly upright, his tiny hands meticulously examining a smooth pebble with the concentrated focus typically associated with a seasoned scholar. By his 3rd day, he had somehow managed to stealthily crawl to the very threshold of the cave and return, accomplishing the journey without emitting a single sound, apparently driven by an innate desire to survey the panoramic view from a multitude of different perspectives. It was in the mid-morning hours of the 4th day that Zeus made his heralded arrival at the cave. He did not herald his presence with the customary grandiosity of thunderous roars and bolts of lightning, as he occasionally did when intent on making an indelible impression. Instead, he simply materialized at the cave's entrance, presenting the unassuming visage of a benevolent wayfarer, clad in a plain brown cloak and leaning upon a simple walking staff. Only his eyes, which held an unfathomable depth and an ancient wisdom that bespoke of witnessing the very genesis of the cosmos, betrayed his true, divine identity. "Good morning, Maya," Zeus greeted her softly, his voice imbued with a gentle warmth. "I trust you do not object to an old companion paying a brief visit to make acquaintance with the newest scion of our extended family." Maya had, in truth, been anticipating this very visitation ever since the incident involving the stolen cattle. She offered Zeus a welcoming smile and gestured gracefully for him to enter the cave's inviting interior. "He has been awaiting your arrival," she stated, a hint of maternal pride in her tone. "I believe he instinctively recognizes who you are." And indeed the infant Hermes had, with remarkable precocity, turned his head toward the cave entrance the precise moment Zeus appeared, his bright, intelligent eyes fixated upon his father with an expression of discerning interest that was truly astonishing in one so incredibly young. Zeus settled himself comfortably, adopting a cross-legged posture upon the plush furs beside Hermes's small blanket, and proceeded to scrutinize his son with meticulous attention. The baby, in turn, regarded him with an equally unwavering gaze, and for a prolonged moment the cave was enveloped in a tranquil silence as father and son quietly assessed one another's presence. "So," Zeus finally remarked, his voice resonating with a warm, paternal amusement, "I understand you have already left quite an indelible mark upon your brother Apollo." Hermes responded with a joyful gurgle and extended one diminutive hand towards Zeus's magnificent beard. When Zeus graciously inclined his head, allowing the infant to make contact, Hermes promptly grasped a small handful of the divine whiskers, tugging gently as if conducting a subtle test of their very authenticity. "He has been like this since the moment of his birth," Maya elucidated, her gaze tenderly fixed upon her son, always meticulously investigating every detail, perpetually endeavoring to comprehend the underlying mechanics of how things function. "Only yesterday I observed him attempting to dismantle the intricate clasp on my cloak. He appeared genuinely frustrated that he could not decipher its complex mechanism." Zeus chuckled softly, a deep, resonant sound, and with delicate care disengaged his beard from Hermes' tenacious grip. Intelligence, it seems, is a pervasive trait within our lineage, he observed with a knowing smile. However, this particular young one appears to have been blessed with an exceptionally generous measure of curiosity to accompany his innate intellect. What transpired next was an occurrence that Maya would indelibly recall for the duration of her remarkably long life. Zeus reached into the voluminous folds of his cloak and produced a small, exquisite object that seemed to radiate with an inherent internal luminescence. It was a caduceus, a magnificent golden staff intricately adorned at its apex with two gracefully intertwined serpents and a delicate pair of diminutive wings. This sacred artifact belonged to my previous messenger, Zeus explained to Hermes, holding the staff at an accessible height, where the infant could clearly perceive its intricate beauty. She was a truly magnificent goddess named Iris, renowned for conveying messages across the celestial expanse upon resplendent rainbow bridges. However, Iris has recently chosen to embrace new responsibilities, dedicating her efforts to assisting mortals with their flourishing gardens and vibrant flowers, which consequently necessitates the appointment of a new divine messenger. Hermes, his eyes wide with an almost insatiable fascination, instinctively extended both tiny hands toward the gleaming caduceus. The very instant his diminutive fingers made contact with the golden staff, something truly extraordinary unfolded. The delicate wings adorning the summit of the caduceus began to flutter gently, as if awakening, and the two serpentine forms gracefully entwined around the shaft commenced their fluid movement, sliding seamlessly around each other in an unending, mesmerizing dance. I believe he rather appreciates it, Maya remarked with a serene smile, observing her son's profound engagement. More than merely appreciating it, Zeus corrected, his gaze intently fixed upon Hermes, who had somehow managed to grasp the staff with surprising tenacity, despite its length being nearly equivalent to his own stature. Observe his feet. Maya's gaze immediately dropped, and she let out a soft gasp of astonishment. Small, radiant golden wings had miraculously materialized upon Hermes' tiny, bare feet. These ethereal appendages perfectly mirrored the delicate wings adorning the caduceus. They fluttered with a gentle, almost tentative motion, as if testing their newfound capabilities, and Hermes, in response to this wondrous sensation, erupted into peals of pure, unadulterated delight. The esteemed position of divine messenger is not a role one formally applies for, Zeus elucidated to his son, his voice resonating with gravitas. It is a destiny one is inherently born to fulfill, and I believe it is unequivocally evident that you were definitively brought into existence for this very purpose. Over the course of the ensuing hour, Zeus meticulously outlined to Hermes the multifaceted responsibilities that would accompany his role as the messenger god. This esteemed position would, of course, necessitate frequent journeys to the majestic peaks of Mount Olympus, where he would receive vital communiques from the other esteemed deities. Furthermore, there would be extensive aerial expeditions across the vast expanse of the ancient world, tasked with delivering crucial communications to both mortals and immortals alike. His duties would also encompass the resolution of complex problems, the mediation of various disputes, and, perpetually, the imperative need to exercise swift and inventive thought when circumstances inevitably grew intricate. Hermes, for his part, absorbed every word of this comprehensive explanation with the intense concentration typically displayed by an individual genuinely enthusiastic about a significant professional opportunity. When Zeus elaborated upon the more challenging facets of the work, the instances when messages had to be conveyed to recalcitrant recipients, or when the messenger was compelled to devise ingenious strategies to accomplish seemingly insurmountable tasks, Hermes' bright eyes distinctly sparkled with a particular keen interest. "I'm confident," Zeus declared finally, his voice imbued with a sense of profound conviction, "that you are destined to excel remarkably so in this vital work." Yet Zeus had not concluded his exposition of Hermes' newly designated role. Being the divine messenger, it transpired, encompassed a multitude of additional responsibilities. Hermes would also assume the mantle of the god of travellers, extending his protective aegis over all who embarked upon journeys far from their familiar abodes. He would serve as the benevolent guardian of merchants and traders, assisting them in conducting equitable commerce and shielding them from the machinations of thieves and deceivers. He was to safeguard boundaries and borders, ensuring that agreements forged between neighbouring kingdoms were scrupulously honoured. Perhaps most significantly, Zeus elaborated, Hermes would function as an indispensable guide between disparate realms. On occasion, he would be entrusted with the solemn duty of conveying messages between the vibrant world of the living and the shadowy dominion of the dead. At other times, he would extend his compassionate guidance to lost souls, helping them navigate their way to their rightful ultimate destinations. It was indeed a profound and serious undertaking, one that demanded not merely acute cleverness, but also a deep wellspring of compassion and sagacious wisdom. As the formidable words of Zeus, his celestial progenitor, resonated through the confines of the mountain cave, a remarkable and accelerated metamorphosis gripped young Hermes. With each passing moment, his infant form seemed to shed its initial fragility, his gaze sharpening, his posture gaining an undeniable dignity. By the time his divine father concluded the comprehensive exposition of his weighty responsibilities and the manifold duties awaiting him, the nascent deity was observed sitting with an unwavering uprightness, clutching his iconic caduceus with a palpable, innate assurance. He now undeniably presented the very embodiment of the celestial courier he was fated to evolve into, his every feature exuding the gravitas of his nascent divine appointment. "There remains but one final accoutrement," Zeus declared, his voice carrying an air of paternal solemnity, as his hand once more delved into the voluminous folds of his majestic cloak. From its depths he produced a diminutive yet exquisitely crafted traveller's hat, fashioned from the softest, most supple felt. Its generous, encompassing brim was designed with meticulous foresight, promising an impeccable defence against the relentless glare of the sun's rays and the sudden downpours of precipitation. Indeed, the king of the gods affirmed, every dedicated courier requires the most appropriate and functional equipment for their arduous journeys. The moment Zeus carefully settled the hat upon Hermes' small head, it conformed with an astonishing bespoke perfection. Instantly, as if by an unseen magical impulse, a pair of delicate miniature wings unfurled from either side of the headpiece. These new aerial appendages mirrored precisely the existing wings adorning his fleet-footed sandals and those gracefully integrated into his staff, the caduceus, completing a harmonious visual testament to his destined swiftness. Hermes, with an infant's natural curiosity, extended a small hand to gently caress the newly formed wings of his hat. At his tender touch, they stirred and quivered, producing a soft, melodious rustling, an ethereal sound akin to the merriest, most gentle peals of laughter. Witnessing this profound transformation, Maya, his mother, found herself enveloped in a complex tapestry of conflicting sentiments. A profound maternal pride swelled within her breast, accompanied by an exhilarating anticipation for her son's momentous new station within the divine pantheon. Yet, intertwined with this joy was a delicate thread of melancholy, a poignant awareness that the serene, secluded rhythm of her existence within the mountain cave was drawing to a close. Hermes, her precious child, would now be obligated to dedicate substantial periods to Mount Olympus, immersed in the rigorous acquisition of his manifold responsibilities and the intricate introductions to the formidable assembly of the other Olympian deities. Nevertheless, the sagacious Zeus, ever perceptive, appeared to discern the subtle nuances of her emotional landscape. "He shall forever possess a cherished abode here alongside you," the mighty Zeus affirmed, his voice imbued with a soothing certainty, offering a balm to her maternal anxieties. "Mount Silene, this hallowed ground, will perpetually stand as his revered birthplace, an inviolable haven, his sanctuary for repose whenever the clamour of the divine realm necessitates a period of profound tranquillity and quietude. This very cavern Maya shall endure as his ultimate refuge, an unwavering bastion of peace." Thus, with the decree of the supreme deity, Hermes, a mere 4 days into his nascent existence, formally ascended to his exalted station as the esteemed messenger of the Olympian gods. However, his departure from the serene slopes of Mount Silene was not immediate. Instead, Zeus, in his infinite wisdom and consideration, proposed a brief interlude, suggesting that the young god tarry a few additional days in the comforting presence of his mother. This period was intended for him to acclimate fully to the extraordinary spectrum of his newly acquired divine faculties and to diligently practice the skillful manipulation of his sacred winged accoutrements. The ensuing days unfolded as a period brimming with delicate yet profound experimentation. Young Hermes diligently applied himself to mastering the intricate mechanics of his divine instruments. He painstakingly learned to orchestrate the ethereal wings affixed to his sandals, coaxing them to flutter with precisely the requisite velocity to elevate his small form a few inches above the terrestrial plane. Concurrently, he honed his grasp upon the caduceus, discerning that its proper handling bestowed upon him an uncanny, almost telepathic ability to comprehend the innermost thoughts and subtle emotional currents of any individual he encountered. Furthermore, he dedicated countless hours to traversing the rugged mountainside, allowing himself to grow intimately comfortable with the unique sensation of his winged hat, relishing the unexpected benefit of how its airy appendages maintained a refreshing coolness about his head, even beneath the intense embrace of the warm afternoon sun. Maya, her heart swelling with an admixture of profound wonder and immense pride, carefully observed her son's rapid evolution. Before her very eyes was a nascent deity, unequivocally marked for extraordinary accomplishments and a pivotal role in the cosmic order. Yet this same powerful child still exhibited an endearing, unhurried inclination to scrutinize intriguing geological formations and to playfully pursue ephemeral butterflies flitting amidst the fragrant mountain herbs. This captivating synthesis of formidable divine potency and an untainted childlike inquisitiveness rendered him utterly unparalleled, a truly singular entity among all the celestial beings she had ever encountered or known. On what would prove to be his final evening within the familiar confines of the cave, prior to his inaugural official journey to the majestic heights of Mount Olympus, Hermes settled beside his mother at the cavern's maw. Together they gazed upon the breathtaking spectacle of the sun descending, casting its final resplendent rays across the tranquil verdant panorama of ancient Greece. The radiant, burnished golden light imbued his recently acquired wings with an ethereal shimmer, causing them to gleam like polished jewels, while the soft, caressing evening breeze playfully rustled the delicate feathers adorning his new headwear. "Do you feel a tremor of apprehension regarding the morrow?" Maya inquired, her voice a hushed, tender murmur, seeking to gauge the depth of her young son's emotions. Hermes, with a nascent wisdom that belied his tender years, pondered his mother's query with profound earnestness before articulating his response. "A mere wisp of trepidation, perhaps," he conceded, his tone thoughtful, "but predominantly a vibrant current of exhilaration courses through me. I am convinced, mother, that the vocation of a messenger shall prove to be precisely the quintessential undertaking for which my very essence was divinely fashioned." And as the first shimmering constellations began to pierce the deepening azure of the nocturnal firmament above the venerable Mount Silene, a shared, profound sense of assurance settled upon both mother and son. They harboured an unwavering conviction that this imminent, pivotal chapter in Hermes's burgeoning divine existence would unfold, replete with precisely the sort of exhilarating exploits and challenging endeavours that would allow for the magnificent and full actualization of his truly extraordinary innate gifts. A mere 24 hours following his momentous inaugural appointment as the celestial messenger, the youthful Hermes was already embarking upon a significant revelation. His new occupation, despite its inherent glamour, necessitated a considerably greater amount of terrestrial locomotion than his initial anticipations had suggested. While possessing the undeniable faculty of flight, a swift recourse when exigency demanded, Zeus, his sagacious father, had meticulously elucidated that a substantial portion of a messenger's crucial duties demanded an unwavering patience and an acute, meticulous power of observation. This imperative, in turn, mandated travel at ground level, affording ample opportunity to discern and assimilate subtle, yet potentially vital details often overlooked from an aerial perspective. On this specific morning, imbued with the crisp freshness of dawn, Hermes embarked upon his descent from the verdant slopes of Mount Silene, directing his course toward the distant town of Pylos. His inaugural mission involved the conveyance of an important missive from the revered goddess Demeter to a local farmer, providing crucial counsel regarding the optimal temporal window for the sowing of his wheat. This task represented a delightful and uncomplicated undertaking, precisely the sort of introductory assignment Zeus typically bestowed upon nascent couriers to facilitate their gradual acclimatization to their burgeoning responsibilities. The winding pathway meandered gracefully through ancient groves of gnarled olive trees and fragrant patches of untamed herbs, and Hermes found himself relishing the journey with profound pleasure. His winged sandals imparted an ethereal lightness to each step, rendering his progress seemingly effortless, while his newly acquired hat, with its broad brim, impeccably shielded his eyes from the intensifying morning sun. Periodically he would pause, compelled by an insatiable curiosity, to scrutinize some captivating detail, perhaps a flower of particularly vivid hue, a geologically intriguing rock formation of peculiar asymmetry, or a diligent bird meticulously constructing its nest amidst the silvery leaves of an olive branch. It was precisely during one of these spontaneous halts, moments dedicated to his keen observation of the natural world, that Hermes stumbled upon a serendipitous discovery, one destined to fundamentally alter the very trajectory of music for all eternity. He had momentarily paused adjacent to a diminutive, babbling stream, intending to quench his thirst with its cool, clear waters, when his sharp gaze registered a slow, deliberate movement across the sun-dappled path directly before him. It was a venerable tortoise, an ancient-looking creature whose shell boasted an intricate, mesmerizing pattern, advancing with the characteristic unhurried dignity for which its species is renowned, steadily progressing toward the inviting trickle of the stream. In stark contrast to the typical human reaction, where an individual would merely navigate around the slow-moving reptile and resume their journey, Hermes possessed an extraordinary intellect, a mind uniquely attuned to perceiving latent potential and innovative possibilities in the most unexpected of places. As he intently observed the tortoise's deliberate, measured advance, his thoughts began to coalesce around the creature's distinctive carapace. He noted its almost ideal hemispherical contour, a naturally occurring hollowed chamber that remarkably produced a subtle, faint resonance each time the tortoise shifted its weight. Though the auditory output was exceedingly delicate, Hermes's acutely sensitive ears immediately registered its presence. In that precise moment, a groundbreaking concept began to crystallize within his remarkably inventive mind. From the earliest moments of his remarkably brief existence, Hermes had harbored an intrinsic, profound fascination with the intricate world of sounds and the ethereal beauty of music. Even within his few days, he had already keenly observed that a diverse array of materials yielded distinct acoustic properties when subjected to percussive force, plucking, or the passage of air. His youthful curiosity had driven him to rudimentary experiments, crafting rudimentary whistles from hollow reeds, fashioning resonant drums from sections of fallen logs, and assembling rhythmic rattles from desiccated seed pods. Yet despite these inventive endeavours, he had never quite succeeded in fabricating an instrument capable of articulating the rich, complex, and utterly beautiful harmonies that frequently resonated within the vibrant chambers of his imagination. Now, gazing intently upon the unique architecture of the tortoise's shell, Hermes experienced a sudden, illuminating flash of insight, recognizing it as the perfect, long-sought resolution to his enduring creative dilemma. It is imperative, before any potential disquietude regarding the well-being of the tortoise begins to trouble the reader, to understand a crucial detail. This particular venerable creature had already traversed the span of several centuries, enduring countless seasons. Moreover, it had, quite recently, arrived at a serene internal resolution that its time for earthly endeavour was complete, and it was prepared to transition to whatever profound state of being awaits in the natural cycle of a tortoise's enduring existence. Indeed, the ancient reptile appeared to manifest an almost palpable contentment when Hermes, with an innate gentleness, drew near and articulated his innovative concept. It was as if the aged creature derived deep satisfaction from the knowledge that its exquisitely patterned shell would be transmuted into an artifact that would generate profound joy and delight for countless others. Hermes, for his part, executed his task with utmost meticulousness and profound reverence. Upon the completion of his initial endeavour, he held in his hands a flawlessly shaped, resonant bowl, fashioned entirely from the tortoise's shell. Yet this remarkable creation represented merely the foundational element of his grander design. The subsequent stage of Hermes's ambitious undertaking necessitated the procurement of suitable strings. This particular requirement presented a considerably more intricate and challenging conundrum than the acquisition of the shell itself. However, by a stroke of fortuitous circumstance, his keen eyes discerned a modest herd of cattle placidly grazing in a nearby pasture. These were not the hallowed, sacred beasts of divine lineage, such as those famously tended by Apollo, but rather unremarkable terrestrial bovines, the property of a local agrarian. With purposeful steps, Hermes advanced toward the farmer, prepared to articulate the specifics of his burgeoning creative endeavour. "I am engaged in the earnest endeavour of crafting a novel musical instrument," he candidly informed the perplexed man. "For its harmonious completion I find myself in dire need of a quantity of sinew, to be meticulously fashioned into resonant strings. Would you, good sir, be inclined to exchange a measure of your cattle's sinew in return for a potent blessing bestowed upon your entire herd?" The agrarian, his gaze fixed upon the youthful stranger, whose distinctive headwear and ethereal winged sandals immediately set him apart, felt an instinctive, profound intuition. An inner voice whispered that this was no commonplace petition emanating from an unremarkable individual. "And what precise nature would this promised blessing assume?" he queried, his tone tinged with a judicious caution, seeking further elucidation. "Your cherished cattle shall forever be immune to the perils of straying," Hermes declared with an unwavering certainty, his promise imbued with divine authority. "Irrespective of the distances they might roam, they shall, with an unerring instinct, invariably navigate their path back to the secure embrace of their homestead." This proposed exchange struck the farmer as an eminently equitable arrangement, particularly given his perpetual anxieties concerning his valuable livestock's tendency to wander beyond the secure confines of his property. Without further hesitation, he furnished Hermes with several elongated strips of tough sinew. In return, Hermes, with a delicate and respectful touch, laid his hand upon the forehead of each individual cow, bestowing upon them a potent and unerring sense of homing, an intrinsic navigational faculty. Possessing now both the resonant shell and the newly acquired sinew for strings, Hermes sought out a sheltered, comfortable respite beneath the expansive canopy of an ancient olive tree. There he commenced the intricate and delicate artistry of assembling his ground-breaking musical instrument. With meticulous precision, he stretched the slender sinew strips across the natural aperture of the shell, painstakingly adjusting their tension until each individual string, when gently plucked, yielded a distinct, pure musical note. In total, he fashioned 7 such strings, tuning them with an innate sensibility to produce a rich, harmonious scale that resonated with profound satisfaction within his discerning ear. Yet the inventive spirit of Hermes was far from sated. His creation, though remarkable, remained incomplete. The nascent instrument necessitated a crucial ergonomic enhancement, a structural element to facilitate a secure grip for the musician and to appropriately position their hands for optimal playability. Hermes, with his characteristic ingenuity, deftly resolved this challenge by meticulously affixing two gracefully curved pieces of highly polished wood to opposing sides of the shell. These elegantly integrated components formed what would, in later ages, come to be universally recognized as the distinctive arms of the lyre. With the painstaking completion of his inventive endeavor, Hermes now cradled in his hands an artifact utterly unprecedented, a creation unlike anything that had ever existed throughout the annals of the world's history. He tentatively plucked a single string in an experimental gesture, a soft smile gracing his lips at the pure, exquisitely sweet sound that resonated forth. Next, he ventured to strum several strings in unison, and was met with an immediate, profound delight at the rich, resonant harmony that effortlessly emerged. For the duration of the subsequent hour, Hermes remained seated beneath the dappled shade of the venerable olive tree, wholly engrossed in the process of intimately acquainting himself with his remarkable new instrument. He soon discerned that various intricate combinations of the strings possessed the power to evoke a diverse spectrum of emotional states and atmospheric qualities. Some arrangements, when played, produced tones that were undeniably joyful and vibrantly energetic, while others possessed a gentle, profoundly soothing quality. Certain melodies transported his mind to the breathtaking vista of a sunrise, unfurling over majestic mountains, whereas others conjured the tranquil image of rain softly falling upon verdant leaves. As his fingers danced across the strings, Hermes instinctively began to vocalize, humming and then softly singing, improvising lyrical narratives to accompany the enchanting melodies that poured forth from his lyre. He wove tales of his morning peregrination, of the venerable tortoise that had so generously contributed its shell, of the farmer's blessed cattle, the enduring olive trees, and the crystalline stream where he had paused to refresh himself. The sublime fusion of the lyre's nascent music and his own melodious voice culminated in an auditory tapestry of such profound beauty that, as if drawn by an invisible, irresistible force, birds began to congregate in the branches directly above him, settling silently to listen, utterly captivated. It was during a period when Hermes was entirely engrossed in his innovative musical endeavours that Apollo made his appearance. The radiant god of the sun and arts had been journeying through the vicinity, tending to his own divine responsibilities, when his ears caught the strains of a melody utterly distinct from any he had previously encountered. As the revered patron of music and lyrical verse, Apollo found himself irresistibly drawn to investigate the source of this captivating sound. What unfolded before him was the sight of a youthful Hermes, seated serenely beneath the boughs of an ancient olive tree, expertly playing an instrument Apollo had never before laid eyes upon, all while singing with an inherent musicality that was truly remarkable. For several minutes, Apollo stood at the periphery of the olive grove, listening in profound astonishment. The musical execution was, without question, technically superb. The nascent instrument was impeccably tuned, and Hermes's performance revealed an intuitive grasp of harmonic structures and rhythmic complexities that typically required many years of dedicated practice to cultivate. Yet, beyond its technical brilliance, the music possessed an emotional depth that resonated deeply within Apollo's very being. It exuded a joyous quality without descending into mere frivolity, displayed intricate patterns without becoming pretentious, and conveyed a beauty that felt entirely natural and effortlessly expressed. When Hermes concluded his enchanting song and became aware of Apollo's presence nearby, he offered a warm smile and a cheerful wave. "Greetings, brother," he called out, his voice light and inviting. "Might you be interested in hearing my latest creation?" Apollo approached with measured steps, his gaze intently fixed upon the lyre nestled in Hermes d'Asti's hands. "What, pray tell, is that remarkable object?" he inquired, his tone imbued with unfeigned curiosity. "I have bestowed upon it the name lyre," Hermes elucidated, carefully presenting the instrument for Apollo's closer inspection. "I fashioned it using the shell of a tortoise along with sinews from cattle and select pieces of olive wood. Allow me to demonstrate its voice once more." Hermes proceeded to play a brief, exquisitely sweet melody that seemed to encapsulate the very essence of a tranquil dawn in ancient Greece. Apollo listened with the undivided attention characteristic of a true connoisseur of sound, and as the final notes faded, he shook his head in profound wonderment. "That is truly extraordinary," Apollo declared. "I have never before heard anything quite like it. The timbre is so pristine, so perfectly balanced in its resonance, and the manner in which you wield it suggests years of diligent practice." "It is not particularly challenging," Hermes replied with a touch of modesty. "Once one comprehends the interplay of the strings, the music almost seems to manifest itself. Would you care to give it a try?" Apollo accepted the lyre with the profound reverence one might reserve for a priceless artifact. He meticulously plucked each string individually, carefully discerning the unique tone and pitch of every note. Subsequently, he attempted to strum several strings in unison and was utterly captivated by the rich, intricate harmonies that emerged. For the ensuing minutes, Apollo immersed himself in experimenting with the instrument, and it swiftly became apparent that he possessed an innate aptitude for playing it. His extensive background in musical training enabled him to grasp the lyre's full potential almost instantaneously. Before long, he was crafting melodies that compelled even Hermes to pause and listen in open admiration. "This is simply incredible," Apollo exclaimed, his voice brimming with unbridled excitement. "This instrument, it is precisely what I have been seeking. For years I have striven to discover a means to create music that could rival the inherent beauty of poetry, and this lyre, it makes that aspiration entirely possible." Hermes observed his brother's burgeoning enthusiasm with increasing delight. It was abundantly clear that Apollo apprehended the lyre's profound significance in a manner that Hermes himself could not fully replicate. While Hermes certainly found enjoyment in music and possessed an inherent talent for its creation, Apollo was genuinely consumed by an ardent passion for it. Music was not merely an activity Apollo engaged in, it was an indispensable facet of his very identity. "You know," Hermes mused thoughtfully, "I believe this lyre would find greater contentment with you than it ever would with me." Apollo looked up from the instrument, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "What do you mean by that, brother?" "I fashioned it primarily out of a keen curiosity regarding the mechanics of sound," Hermes elucidated. and I am certainly pleased that I did so. It proved to be an enjoyable endeavour, and I gleaned a great deal from the process. However, you are the divine patron of music. You possess a deeper understanding of what this instrument is truly capable of achieving, and you, I am certain, can coax it to sing in ways I never could. Apollo was profoundly touched by his brother's magnanimity. "Are you truly certain?" he inquired. "You have, after all, brought something entirely novel into existence here. This lyre is unequivocally your invention." "I am quite certain," Hermes affirmed with a genial smile. "Moreover, I still vividly recall the incident involving the cattle. I never properly offered my apologies for that transgression, and I believe this might serve as an appropriate gesture of reconciliation." Apollo chuckled softly and carefully cradled the lyre in his arms. "Consider it entirely forgiven," he declared. "This is, without a doubt, the most magnificent gift I have ever had the privilege to receive." And so it came to pass that the world's inaugural lyre transitioned into Apollo's cherished possession. From that day forward, Apollo became renowned throughout the entirety of ancient Greece, not only as the esteemed god of music and poetry, but also as the undisputed master of the lyre. Nevertheless, he never once forgot that it was his clever younger brother who had conceived and brought forth the instrument in the first place. Years later, whenever Apollo performed upon the lyre at grand festivals and joyous celebrations, he would invariably recount the compelling narrative of how Hermes had ingeniously crafted the instrument from a tortoise shell, the sinews of cattle, and pieces of olive wood during what had begun as a routine morning stroll. This captivating tale gained widespread fame throughout Greece, solidifying Hermes' reputation not merely as the swift messenger god, but also as the brilliant inventor of one of the world's most exquisite musical instruments. As for Hermes himself, he cheerfully resumed his journey towards Pylos that very day, whistling a light tune as he walked. He had commenced the morning with the seemingly straightforward task of delivering a message, and he was concluding it with the profound satisfaction of having created something destined to bring immense joy to countless individuals for generations to come. It was precisely this kind of unanticipated adventure that rendered his divine role as messenger so endlessly fascinating. And if one were to listen attentively on tranquil evenings, it is said that one might still discern the faint, ethereal strains of Apollo's lyre drifting across the verdant hills of Greece, playing melodies that first sprang from the fertile, creative mind of young Hermes on a peaceful morning long, long ago. Following the notable success of his lyre-making exploit, Hermes found himself entrusted with an increasing number of crucial assignments from the venerable Zeus. His duties were no longer confined to merely conveying simple directives to farmers concerning optimal crop timing, or offering gentle reminders to shepherds about their due offerings at local temples. Now Zeus was confiding in him with communications of far greater import, messages that possessed the potential to sway the destinies of entire city-states, determine the outcomes of monumental wars, and profoundly influence the intricate relationships between the gods and mortal humanity. It was on a crisp autumn morning that Hermes received what would prove to be one of his most intricate and challenging assignments to date. He had been summoned to the magnificent great hall of Mount Olympus, where Zeus customarily presided over his court amidst towering marble columns that ascended majestically into ethereal clouds and swirling mists. The hall consistently exuded an aura of breathtaking impressiveness, But on this particular day, it seemed especially resplendent, with golden light streaming through its grand windows and the very air shimmering with a divine energy potent enough to inspire a degree of awe even among other deities. Zeus occupied his majestic throne, which was meticulously carved from a single colossal sapphire and adorned with intricate depictions of eagles and formidable lightning bolts. Yet, despite the awe-inspiring setting, his countenance bore a troubled expression, and Hermes could discern immediately that a matter of grave seriousness was unfolding. "Hermes," Zeus intoned, his voice resonating with a slight echo throughout the expansive hall, "I possess a message that requires urgent delivery to the city of Thebes. But I must caution you, this will not be a simple transmission. The message concerns a prophecy, and prophecies, as you are undoubtedly aware, can be exceedingly delicate matters." Hermes offered a nod of understanding. He had, in his relatively brief tenure as a divine messenger, learned that prophecies ranked among the most arduous communications to manage effectively. Unlike straightforward commands or uncomplicated pieces of information, prophecies necessitated delivery in precisely the correct manner, at the exact opportune moment, and to the perfectly designated individual. Any misstep in these crucial details could result in the prophecy being gravely misunderstood, completely disregarded, or, even worse, inadvertently precipitating an outcome diametrically opposed to its intended purpose. The prophecy pertains to King Laius of Thebes. Zeus continued, his tone solemn. He is, by all accounts, a virtuous man and a just ruler, but he has recently embarked upon a series of decisions that are poised to usher in considerable tribulation for his kingdom. The prophecy is intended to serve as a dire warning, affording him a crucial opportunity to alter his ill-fated course. Zeus extended a scroll to Hermes, which seemed to radiate with a soft, intrinsic luminescence. "This message must be conveyed to Laius personally. However, herein lies the formidable challenge. He is presently immersed in the midst of an elaborate festival, celebrating his recent triumphant military victory. He is surrounded by jubilant citizens, esteemed visiting dignitaries, and fellow monarchs from neighbouring cities. He is, to put it mildly, in no frame of mind to entertain warnings concerning potential future calamities." Hermes thoughtfully scrutinized the glowing scroll. "So, my task is to devise a method to ensure he takes this prophecy seriously, notwithstanding his current feelings of confidence and resounding success." "Precisely," Zeus affirmed, "and it must transpire swiftly. The longer he procrastinates in heeding this warning, the more arduous it will become for him to avert the troubles that the prophecy so vividly describes." Hermes carefully secured the scroll within his messenger bag and made ready for his departure to Thebes. Yet, as he winged his way across the sprawling Greek countryside, his mind was already actively engaged in contemplating the most effective strategy for approaching King Laius. Simply materializing in the heart of the bustling festival and announcing his possession of a prophecy would, in all likelihood, prove entirely ineffectual. Kings who are reveling in the glory of military triumphs seldom desire to interrupt their festivities to be apprised of potential future adversities. As Hermes soared over the city of Thebes, he could discern that the festival was, indeed, in full, vibrant swing. The thoroughfares were lavishly adorned with colourful banners and intricate garlands of fresh flowers. Citizens were dancing joyously in the public squares, while vendors enthusiastically hawked special festival delicacies. Everywhere, a palpable atmosphere of unbridled joy and celebration permeated the air. In the very nucleus of the city, the royal palace glowed brilliantly, illuminated by hundreds of flickering oil lamps. From the expansive courtyard below, Hermes could distinctly hear the harmonious strains of music and the cheerful sounds of laughter drifting upwards. The swift divine messenger, Hermes, alighted with subtle grace upon a palace rooftop, taking a moment to survey the vibrant festivities unfolding below. King Laius was readily discernible amidst the jubilant throng. Positioned prominently at the high table within the palace courtyard, he was adorned with a resplendent golden crown, his countenance radiating sincere joy as he observed his loyal populace engaged in celebration. It was evident that he commanded widespread affection, a beloved sovereign whose subjects held him in high esteem. This observation was indeed favourable, suggesting a monarch deeply invested in the prosperity and well-being of his citizenry, and thus potentially amenable to heeding an urgent admonition, provided it was conveyed with judicious tact. However, Hermes also discerned that the king was enveloped by a multitude of councillors, military commanders and esteemed foreign dignitaries, each seemingly striving to capture his exclusive attention. All were eager to tender their felicitations on his recent triumph, present lavish offerings, or engage in discourse concerning prospective alliances and commercial accords. Securing an unchaperoned interlude with Laius under these circumstances appeared an almost insurmountable challenge. While Hermes observed the ongoing revelry, a strategic concept started to coalesce within his keen intellect. It was an audacious scheme, fraught with peril, demanding impeccable synchronization, yet it held the potential for success. Swiftly, Hermes descended to the city's bustling marketplace, now largely deserted as the entire populace converged upon the festival grounds. There, he located a vendor's booth specializing in earthenware and procured with a casual air a modest clay goblet and a diminutive oil luminary. Subsequently, he directed his path towards the royal residence. However, rather than attempting entry via the heavily guarded principal gates, he sought out a discreet auxiliary portal, commonly utilized by the palace staff transporting provisions and vintages from the culinary quarters. Adopting the guise of a youthful attendant bearing sustenance, Hermes navigated the labyrinthine palace passages, heading in the direction of the central courtyard. His intention was to integrate inconspicuously among the other retainers and patiently anticipate the propitious instant to engage the monarch. The coveted opportunity materialized approximately 60 minutes later, as King Laius gracefully withdrew from the heart of the jubilant commemoration to seek solace at a modest shrine nestled within a tranquil recess of the palace gardens. This sacred edifice honoured Athena, the venerated goddess of wisdom, and it appeared Laius had chosen to render a personal expression of gratitude for his recent military triumph. Hermes observed intently as the monarch ignited aromatic incense at the hallowed site, and remained in hushed contemplation for a brief period of supplication. This confluence of circumstances was utterly serendipitous. Laius was entirely unaccompanied. His disposition was one of profound reverence, and his thoughts were already profoundly engaged with celestial concerns. Hermes advanced with a hushed tread, still clutching the unassuming clay goblet and oil lamp. "Your Majesty," he uttered in a low, deferential tone, "pray forgive this intrusion." Laius pivoted, anticipating the familiar sight of a palace retainer seeking clarification on the ongoing festival arrangements. Instead, his gaze fell upon a youthful figure whose mien presented a curious blend of the mundane and the exceptional. The enigmatic stranger was clad in modest attire, yet his eyes possessed an inexplicable quality that bespoke profound sagacity and ancient knowledge. And was it merely an illusion, or did a pair of miniature wings indeed adorn his sandals? "I convey salutations from the hallowed peaks of Mount Olympus," Hermes declared, his voice imbued with both reverence and assuredness, "and a vital communiqué directly from Zeus, the sovereign of the gods." A perceptible tremor coursed through Laius's heart. Dispatches from Zeus were exceedingly uncommon, and invariably carried immense import. He cast a swift, circumspect glance about the garden, ensuring their continued solitude, before inclining his head, silently granting Hermes permission to proceed. With meticulous care, Hermes retrieved the luminous parchment from his satchel and extended it towards the monarch. "Lord Zeus has observed your reign and recognizes you as a virtuous sovereign, a man profoundly devoted to the prosperity and security of your populace," Hermes articulated. "Consequently, he wishes to apprise you of a particular course of action you are contemplating, one that bears the potential to unleash profound anguish upon both yourself and your dominion." Laius received the sacred scroll, his hands betraying a slight tremor. "What nature of admonition is this?" he inquired, his voice hushed. "The prophetic inscription will elucidate all matters," Hermes responded with a soothing cadence. "However, Zeus wishes to impress upon you that this caution originates from a profound esteem for your inherent sagacity and a genuine solicitude for the felicity of your subjects. He firmly believes you possess the discernment to make judicious decisions, provided you are furnished with the entirety of the requisite knowledge." This diplomatic and respectful method of communication proved precisely the correct strategy for engaging King Laius. Far from perceiving the message as a menace or a censure, the monarch experienced a profound sense of distinction, recognizing that Zeus held him in sufficiently high regard to proffer such divine counsel. He meticulously unfurled the ancient parchment and absorbed its prophetic declarations with intense scrutiny. The oracle's warning explicitly cautioned that Laius harbored intentions of seeking consultation regarding the begetting of a royal successor, and unequivocally stated that should he proceed with this design, the outcome would precipitate calamitous misfortune for both his lineage and his realm. Conversely, the prophecy advocated for a different course, that he should channel his energies into preparing one of his deserving nephews to ascend to the throne, thereby discovering true gratification in being immortalized as a sovereign, whose reign ushered in an era of tranquility and affluence for his subjects. Laius perused the prophetic pronouncement a second time, meticulously pondering its profound ramifications. It was undeniably accurate that he had been contemplating seeking guidance from an oracle concerning the procreation of offspring. His esteemed queen, Jocasta, had ardently yearned for a child, and as the reigning monarch, Laius felt a considerable imperative to secure a direct successor. Yet the prophecy intimated that this very aspiration, though entirely innate, would inexorably usher in tribulations he could not possibly anticipate. This counsel presents a formidable challenge to embrace. Laius articulated at last. My subjects hold the firm expectation that their sovereign will beget progeny capable of inheriting the royal diadem. Your subjects anticipate their monarch will render sagacious judgments that safeguard the realm's enduring prosperity. Hermes rejoined with conviction. And Zeus, in his infinite perceptiveness, holds that your profound wisdom constitutes your paramount attribute as a ruler. He reposes his faith in your capacity to discern the fundamental distinction between popular anticipation and the genuine welfare of all. The eloquent pronouncements of Hermes facilitated a profound reorientation of Laius's perspective on the matter. The king apprehended that his sovereign mandate transcended merely fulfilling popular expectations. Rather, his paramount duty lay in enacting what was inherently just and correct. Furthermore, if Zeus himself deigned to issue a caution against a specific trajectory, such a divine admonition undeniably warranted the most rigorous and earnest contemplation. Would you be so kind as to convey a response to Zeus on my behalf? Laius inquired. Most assuredly, Hermes affirmed. Kindly convey to him my profound gratitude for his divine guidance, and assure him that I shall meticulously deliberate upon the prophecy's grave admonition. While I may not render my final judgment instantaneously, I solemnly pledge that when my decision is ultimately made, I shall ever bear in mind that my foremost obligation is to safeguard the enduring prosperity of my realm. Hermes inclined his head in approbation. Such a response is precisely what Lord Zeus anticipated, he remarked. Your renown for sagacity is, indeed, entirely merited. As Hermes made ready for his departure, Laius presented one final inquiry. How shall I ascertain if I am indeed making the most judicious selection? A gentle smile graced Hermes's lips. Lord Zeus holds that truly benevolent monarchs possess an innate understanding, deep within their conscience, when their judgments are founded upon righteous principles. Place your reliance upon your intrinsic perceptions and bear in mind that the most exemplary rulers are those prepared to relinquish their individual aspirations for the collective prosperity of their populace. Having imparted this wisdom, Hermes gracefully departed, receding silently through the royal passages and vanishing into the nocturnal expanse. By the hour King Laius rejoined the animated celebration, Hermes was already soaring skyward, charting his course back towards the celestial heights of Mount Olympus, bearing with him the monarch's carefully considered reply for Zeus. Upon Hermes's conveyance of Laius's communique to Zeus, the sovereign of the pantheon expressed his profound contentment with both the monarch's considered reply and Hermes's masterful execution of the challenging mission. That was an exemplary feat, Zeus commended his youthful emissary. You discerned precisely the optimal method to engage a king who was disinclined to receive admonitions, and you successfully guided him to comprehend that the prophecy's intent was to offer succor rather than to pose a menace. It was certainly aided by the fact that he is, in truth, a benevolent ruler, Hermes rejoined. Once he grasped that the caution emanated from a stance of genuine veneration, he proved amenable to heeding it. Zeus inclined his head in pensive acknowledgment. That imparts a crucial insight into the role of a divine herald, he articulated. The manner in which one transmits a message can possess equal, if not greater, significance than the message itself. Mortals are considerably more disposed to assimilate arduous verities when these are presented with benevolence and deference. Thus, Hermes assimilated yet another invaluable precept concerning his sacred vocation as a divine emissary. It became apparent that his duties transcended the mere precise transmission of communique. He was also enjoined to cultivate a deep comprehension of those who were to receive these messages, and to devise ingenious stratagems to aid them in embracing arduous realities when such acceptance became imperative. This profound sagacity was destined to prove an indispensable asset in the multitude of demanding undertakings that awaited him in the future. When last we encountered Hermes in our previous narrative, he had recently internalized profound insights regarding the sagacious and empathetic conveyance of challenging pronouncements. However, the astute divine herald was on the cusp of realizing that his purview of duties stretched considerably beyond the mere transmission of verbal exchanges betwixt deities and mortals. Indeed, the very arteries of travel he traversed daily now beckoned for his devoted vigilance and solicitude. In vision, if you please, the sun-dusted thoroughfares of ancient Hellas as daybreak painted the horizon. These were not the meticulously paved, robust stone arteries that the Romans would subsequently engineer, but rather serpentine earthen tracks, deeply etched into the very soil by innumerable epochs of wayfarers. A portion of these followed venerable commercial conduits that had facilitated mercantile exchange for centuries. Others constituted more recent trails hewn by the passage of military legions or forged when an individual chanced upon a more direct route through a formidable mountain defile. On a veiled morning in the nascent days of spring, Hermes soared above one of these secluded mountain thoroughfares when an occurrence below arrested his attention. A familial group found themselves marooned beside their incapacitated wagon, their gazes fixed with apprehension upon the ominous clouds congregating above. Their sturdy oxen remained placidly harnessed, yet it was painfully evident that a wooden wheel had fractured irreparably, defying any immediate mending. Hermes descended with ethereal lightness nearby, meticulously furling his wings and adjusting his wayfarer's cap to assume the unremarkable semblance of a common traveller. The beleaguered family comprised an aged patriarch, whose eyes held a gentle warmth and whose hands bore the marks of toil, his daughter cradling a slumbering infant, and two small children who clung fearfully to their mother's garments. Experiencing some difficulty with your conveyance? Hermes inquired kindly, approaching the weary traveller with that notably affable expression which readily dispelled apprehension in unfamiliar individuals. The venerable grandfather responded with a fatigued inclination of his head. The wheels suffered a fracture approximately a mile behind us. We are endeavouring to arrive at my brother's farm before the impending spring deluges render the thoroughfares entirely impassable. He then motioned with a sense of futility towards their disabled vehicle, a testament to their predicament. As the divine courier meticulously scrutinized their cart, a profound concern began to disturb his sensibilities. This was far from the inaugural breakdown he had observed on this particular stretch of road. Merely in the preceding week he had witnessed 3 distinct groups of sojourners grappling with analogous predicaments. The pathway's surface was rugged and uneven, fraught with concealed stones and submerged boulders that could readily impair wheels and compromise axles. Crucially, there was an absence of indicators to caution individuals about the perilous sections, no signposts directing them towards the proximate metalworker who could effectuate necessary mends. Operating with precision, Hermes employed his celestial powers to bolster their fractured wheel and buttress the cart's axle. Yet, even as the appreciative household made ready to resume their journey, a significant concept began to materialize within the herald of the gods. Astute mind. Prior to your departure, Hermes stated contemplatively, would you be inclined to assist me with a small endeavor? I wish to erect a significant stone here, intended to alert fellow voyagers about the uneven path forthcoming. The family was pleased to lend their aid, and together they selected an appropriate rock from the roadside. Hermes, utilizing his caduceus, etched a concise communication into its surface. Rough road ahead. Check wheels and axles. Safe repair. Stop. Blacksmith Alexios. 2 miles south in Gia village. As the family bid farewell with a wave and proceeded onward, Hermes stood beside his recently installed marker stone, experiencing a profound feeling of contentment. This modest deed of assistance, he realized, possessed the potential to preclude analogous hardships for future voyages. But why, he mused, should his efforts cease with a single inscription? Over the ensuing weeks, Hermes initiated a monumental undertaking that would fundamentally transform locomotion across the Hellenic world permanently. Whenever his heraldic responsibilities led him along frequently traversed thoroughfares, he allocated time to appraise the obstacles that common folk faced when navigating intercity routes. At perilous alpine defiles where brigands were reputed to lurk, Hermes positioned cautionary monuments that counselled travellers to proceed collectively and proposed more secure bypasses. Near dependable water sources and aquifers, he installed signposts guiding parched wayfarers to potable liquid. At perplexing intersections where routes diverged into numerous courses, he established unambiguous guidance markers, designating the course to principal metropolises with precise spatial determinations. However, Hermes did not confine his efforts to mere navigational data. His acute perceptive abilities allowed him to discern the more nuanced difficulties that rendered journeys arduous or perilous. He designated markers that signified which inns provided reputable hospitality and equitable charges, and which vendors could be trusted to undertake urgent mending to conveyances and equipment. He pinpointed secure bivouac locations where sojourners could pass the hours of darkness free from apprehension, and delineated hazardous zones that should be circumvented once night fell. The marker stones themselves evolved into artistic creations in their own right. Hermes devised a methodology of uncomplicated emblems that even individuals who lacked literacy could comprehend. An etched chalice signified fresh water nearby. A miniature domicile emblem denoted safe lodging. A radiant orb implied an optimal location for open-air encampment beneath the firmament. Cautionary insignia depicted perils such as precipitous escarpments, inundation-susceptible regions, or places where feral creatures were frequently observed. As news of these beneficial wayfaring indicators propagated throughout Greece, travellers began referring to them fondly as Hermes stones. Yet the young god remained unfulfilled with simply delineating current dangers and available provisions. He commenced collaborating with indigenous populations to actually ameliorate the thoroughfares directly. In the town of Corinth, Hermes orchestrated an undertaking to remediate perilous depressions and clear away jagged stones that impaired wagon wheels. He demonstrated to the populace how to cooperate to uphold the pathways that traversed their domain, elucidating that superior thoroughfares would attract an increased influx of merchants and voyagers, which would promote universal economic prosperity. In alpine areas, Hermes assisted inhabitants in erecting provisional refuges stocked with fundamental provisions for travellers overtaken by abrupt tempests. These did not constitute complex edifices, merely unadorned rock dwellings with impervious coverings, seasoned kindling, and reserves of sustenance that local people maintained, replenished in return for modest contributions from thankful sojourners. But perhaps Hermes' foremost pioneering advancement was his resolution for the issue of territorial boundaries. Conflicts frequently emerged when travellers were uncertain of the applicable regulations of a given locality, or when merchants were dubious about regional fiscal obligations and mercantile practices. Collaborating assiduously with chieftains from communities across Greece, Hermes instituted a system of boundary markers that exceeded mere indication of where one domain concluded and a new one commenced. These markers furnished comprehensive particulars about local laws, levy percentages, bazaar dates, and societal practices that would be crucial for visitors to comprehend. A typical demarcation marker might read, "Welcome to Argos territory. Market days 3rd and 7th day of each week. Tax on trade goods, 1 silver coin per cart. Temple of Hera offers sanctuary to all peaceful travellers. Fresh water and lodging available at the Blue Dolphin Inn, 1 mile ahead on Main Road." These enlightening demarcation markers demonstrated immense favourability with both voyagers and indigenous populations. Guests valued having unambiguous data about regional statutes and available provisions, while localities discovered that the indicators mitigated misinterpretations and diminished altercations with unfamiliar individuals traversing their domain. As months elapsed, Hermes' Thoroughfare Amelioration Initiative evolved into an undertaking of significantly grander scale than he had initially contemplated. Communities began soliciting his assistance with implementing beacon networks for maritime regions, devising transport timetables for insular transit, and constructing urgent information systems that could disseminate alerts about everything from impending tempests to brigand operations. The messenger god addressed every plea with his hallmark inventiveness and meticulousness. For coastal communities, he conceived beacon flame arrangements that could convey atmospheric circumstances and port accessibility to vessels nearing from various courses. The signals were uncomplicated yet efficacious. 1 fire meant secure haven. 2 fires meant inclement conditions yet port accessible. 3 fires meant port inaccessible owing to perilous circumstances. For island communities that relied on boat conveyance, Hermes devised timetable frameworks that ensured consistent operation, while also furnishing supplementary conveyance in times of crisis. He instituted provision stores on unpopulated islets where emergency ferries could stop for potable liquid and sustenance during arduous transits. Crucially, Hermes created an informational grid that linked every one of his wayside signposts across the Hellenic landscape. Utilizing the monuments as dispatch points, communities could exchange data about pathway states, meteorological dangers, and security threats that could potentially endanger sojourners. If brigands were observed near a specific alpine defile, the closest locality could deposit an advisory notice at their local Hermes stone, and travellers would become apprised of the peril prior to venturing into the hazardous zone. If a span was compromised by inundation, communities could affix advisories at pertinent indicators situated earlier on the route, affording voyagers an opportunity to discover alternative paths before arriving at the unnavigable intersection. This communication network demonstrated such immense utility that it ultimately transformed into one of the most important intelligence frameworks in the ancient world. Communities began using the Hermes stones not solely for interacting with voyagers, but to exchange crucial intelligence among themselves about agricultural states, commercial prospects, political developments, and atmospheric tendencies. The system cultivated an ethos of collaboration and reciprocal aid that reinforced connections among localities throughout Greece. Villages that had previously possessed minimal interaction commenced collaborative efforts to address shared predicaments. Commerce expanded as merchants experienced greater security traversing extended routes. Artistic and societal interaction thrived as people gained greater assurance regarding travel to remote festivities and commemorations. As Hermes soared above the Hellenic landscape on his customary heraldic assignments, he could discern the beneficial transformations his thoroughfare amelioration initiative had generated. The routes were more uniform and secure. The marker stones offered advantageous direction at each juncture. Communities exhibited greater linkage and collaboration. Paramountly, common folk were able to journey with assurance, aware that assistance and intelligence stood ready at their disposal, irrespective of the moment of necessity. Zeus witnessed these developments in their entirety with increasing esteem for his young messenger's enterprise and sagacity. When he convened Hermes on the divine peak of Mount Olympus to converse about the pathway endeavor, his commendation was heartfelt and sincere. "You've achieved an extraordinary feat," Zeus told him as they strolled jointly amidst the celestial grounds of Olympus. What originated as a modest gesture of benevolence toward a single marooned household has evolved into a comprehensive framework that's ameliorating existence for inhabitants across our dominion. A profound sense of contentment settled upon Hermes following his father's affirmation, yet his inventive mind was already contemplating novel approaches to refine and broaden the burgeoning system. "I have been pondering the possibility of extending our intricate marker network to encompass vital information regarding seasonal meteorological shifts and agricultural timings," he articulated thoughtfully. This expansion would enable agrarian communities to disseminate critical intelligence concerning the most propitious periods for sowing and reaping across diverse geographical locales. Concurrently, mariners could exchange crucial advisories about prevailing seasonal wind patterns and the inherent dangers of impending tempestuous conditions. Zeus, observing his son's boundless ingenuity and formidable ambition, responded with an approving smile. "It appears to me," the Olympian patriarch declared, "that your dedicated tenure as our divine herald will be perpetually marked by your ceaseless quest to devise innovative means of assisting humankind. Indeed, as the twilight hours gently descend upon the tranquil thoroughfares of ancient Greece, one might readily envision Hermes, the indefatigable messenger, still traversing those very pathways. He would be diligently inspecting his strategically placed marker stones, offering succor to weary or stranded wayfarers, and invariably conceptualizing fresh methodologies to render the arduous journey a trifle safer and considerably more agreeable for all who share the ancient routes with him. The resounding triumph of Hermes' ambitious road amelioration initiative engendered an unforeseen consequence, a development that the youthful messenger deity had not initially contemplated. As overland travel became demonstrably more secure and reliably predictable across the Hellenic world, a remarkable transformation began to unfold within the bustling marketplaces of every polis and urban centre. Commercial activity burgeoned with an unprecedented vitality. Merchants who had previously harboured a deep reluctance to hazard extensive expeditions over perilous and uncertain roads now embarked upon regular itineraries between distant metropolises with new-found confidence. Farmers whose mercantile reach had once been confined to the confines of their immediate villages were now discovering the lucrative potential of transporting their agricultural bounty to larger, more distant markets, where their produce commanded significantly enhanced valuations. Similarly, skilled craftspeople were successfully cultivating clientele for their exquisite creations in regions they had scarcely imagined their wares could ever penetrate. It was during a particularly vibrant morning amidst the magnificent agora of Athens that Hermes first fully grasped the profound extent to which his infrastructure enhancements had fundamentally reconfigured the landscape of trade and commerce. He had paused at this venerable public space to convey an urgent dispatch from Athena to one of her esteemed priests. However, as he navigated the thronging market aisles, he was irresistibly struck by the palpable increase in its animation and the astonishing diversity of its offerings. Traders hailing from as far-flung a locale as the island of Crete proudly displayed their exotic commodities alongside the familiar, locally sourced Athenian provisions. A master pottery artisan from Corinth captivated onlookers as he meticulously demonstrated his refined techniques to an enthralled audience, many of whom had never before witnessed such exquisite craftsmanship. Farmers from the rugged mountainous regions were observed bartering their prized cheeses and wool for the coveted olive oil and fine wines produced in the fertile coastal territories. The very air vibrated with a cacophony of conversations conducted in a multitude of distinct dialects, as individuals from across the vast Hellenic sphere engaged in brisk commercial transactions. Yet, even as Hermes keenly observed this vibrant surge in market activity, his discerning gaze began to discern a nascent array of challenges emerging in tandem with this newfound prosperity. Regrettably, not every merchant conducting business was upholding the requisite standards of probity. Some unscrupulous individuals were employing doctored weights to defraud their unsuspecting patrons. Others were prone to making extravagant and unfounded assertions regarding the superior quality or authentic provenance of their merchandise. A discernible minority were exploiting the vulnerability of customers who lacked familiarity with equitable market valuations. Hermes watched with mounting disquiet as an elderly farmer, clearly identifiable as a visitor from a remote mountain hamlet, was unequivocally being defrauded by a cunning cloth merchant. The vendor was demanding a price 3 times the legitimate value for a simple wool cloak. The venerable farmer, unaccustomed to the intricacies of large urban markets, possessed no means of discerning that he was being egregiously overcharged. Without a moment's hesitation, Hermes approached the bewildered farmer and initiated a cordial dialogue. "That is indeed a splendid cloak," Hermes remarked, his gaze carefully appraising the merchant's displayed goods. "However, I must confess I just observed identical wool of comparable quality being offered for sale at precisely half that price, merely 2 stalls yonder." The disingenuous merchant cast a withering glare in Hermes' direction, but found himself utterly incapable of refuting the undeniable truth of the statement. The grateful farmer extended his heartfelt thanks to his helpful new acquaintance and promptly departed to seek out a more honourable dealer, leaving the deceitful merchant to ponder the ramifications of his unethical commercial practices. As Hermes continued his perambulation through the bustling marketplace, he discovered himself compelled to intervene in several analogous scenarios throughout the morning. He adeptly assisted a young woman from the Aegean Islands in avoiding the purchase of inferior olive oil, which had been illicitly adulterated with cheaper, less potent substitutes. He discreetly cautioned a prospective pottery buyer about subtle hairline cracks that had been cunningly concealed through the application of wax and pigment. Furthermore, he judiciously directed a wool merchant toward discerning customers who were prepared to offer equitable compensation for superior quality goods. By the close of that eventful morning, Hermes had successfully thwarted numerous instances of commercial deception and had facilitated connections for countless honest traders with appreciative customers for their wares. Crucially, he had also attained a profound new insight into the indispensable role of fair dealing in ensuring the enduring success of Greek commerce. When unscrupulous merchants engaged in deceitful practices against their clientele, intelligence regarding their dishonorable conduct rapidly propagated through the extensive networks of travelers and traders. This not only tarnished their individual reputations, but also cast a shadow of disrepute upon their entire communities. Consequently, individuals became hesitant to conduct business with anyone originating from localities notorious for harboring dishonest dealers. Conversely, merchants renowned for their unwavering integrity and the consistent quality of their goods attracted patrons from considerable distances. Their prosperity, in turn, conferred benefits not solely upon themselves, but also upon their broader communities. As the expansion of trade stimulated job creation, fostered improved infrastructure, and ultimately led to greater affluence for all, Hermes fully comprehended that the promotion of honest commercial practices transcended the mere act of shielding individual customers from exploitation. It was, in fact, absolutely paramount for the sustained growth and prosperity of the entirety of Greek trade. Over the ensuing several months, Hermes meticulously devised a comprehensive framework designed to bolster equitable commerce throughout the Hellenic realm. He commenced this ambitious undertaking by instituting a robust system of merchant certification, which served to empower honest traders in cultivating reputations for unwavering reliability and superior quality. Collaborating closely with well-established merchants, individuals universally acknowledged for their unblemished integrity, Hermes meticulously forged a dynamic network of references and endorsements. Aspiring new merchants could attain this coveted certification by unequivocally demonstrating their honesty and the excellence of their products to these experienced traders, who would then, in turn, confidently recommend them to clientele in other cities. The sophisticated certification system was ingeniously designed to function reciprocally. Customers, too, had the opportunity to cultivate reputations as principled and dependable trading partners by diligently settling their financial obligations without delay, treating merchants with appropriate deference, and conducting their own business dealings with unimpeachable honesty. Hermes seamlessly integrated this burgeoning merchant network into his already established system of roadside markers. Consequently, the distinctive Hermes stones now provided invaluable information concerning certified honest merchants located in proximate communities, alongside cautionary advisories about dealers who had been formally reported for engaging in fraudulent practices. However, Hermes did not confine his efforts merely to the identification of honest and dishonest traders. He proactively embarked upon a mission to actively assist merchants in refining their operational methodologies and expanding the scope of their enterprises. For the numerous small-scale farmers and independent craftspeople who often felt overwhelmed by the intricate complexities of large-scale markets, Hermes orchestrated a series of illuminating educational workshops. These sessions imparted crucial knowledge on topics such as equitable pricing strategies, stringent quality benchmarks, and highly effective marketing tactics. He meticulously instructed them on how to present their goods in an appealing manner, how to engage in fair and respectful negotiations with customers, and, critically, how to forge enduring business relationships founded upon mutual respect and unwavering trust. For more established merchants, those aspiring to extend their reach into untapped territories, Hermes furnished meticulously detailed intelligence regarding local customs, consumer preferences, and prevailing market conditions specific to diverse regions. He elucidated which commodities were experiencing high demand in particular geographical areas, the price points customers were accustomed to paying, and the most appropriate and respectful protocols for approaching prospective trading partners. Perhaps the most pivotal of Hermes's initiatives involved his dedicated efforts to standardize weights and measures across the entire Greek trading network. One of the most significant impediments to fluid commerce in antiquity, and a frequent source of bewilderment and contention, stemmed from the disparate systems employed by different city-states for quantifying staples such as grain, wine, cloth, and other essential goods. A bushel of wheat in Athens, for instance, could represent a markedly different volumetric quantity than a bushel of wheat in Sparta, an incongruity that inevitably led to misunderstandings and disputes when merchants from distinct polis attempted to engage in transactions. Similarly, the specific measures for wine, olive oil, textile fabrics, and precious metals exhibited considerable variation from one locality to another, thereby rendering it exceptionally challenging for traders to accurately compare prices and compute equitable exchanges. Working with tireless patience alongside civic leaders throughout the breadth of Greece, Hermes meticulously engineered a unified, standardized system of weights and measures. This system was designed for consistent application across all markets, thereby fostering unprecedented commercial transparency. He meticulously established official standard weights in all major trading hubs and diligently trained local administrators to meticulously verify the accuracy of merchant scales and measuring implements. This ambitious standardization project proved far more intricate than its conceptual simplicity might suggest. Various communities had adhered to their traditional, often idiosyncratic measuring systems for generations, and a considerable segment of the populace harbored a profound reluctance to abandon familiar practices. Hermes was therefore compelled to meticulously demonstrate the manifold benefits of standardization with both precision and diplomatic finesse. He lucidly illustrated to merchants how standardized measures would considerably simplify their interactions with trading partners originating from distant cities. He explained to community leaders how the adoption of consistent standards would inevitably draw a greater influx of traders to their local markets, thereby significantly augmenting regional prosperity. Most importantly, he unequivocally demonstrated how standardization would dramatically curtail the incidence of conflicts and misunderstandings that possessed the potential to irrevocably damage vital trading relationships. As these innovative commercial standards were progressively embraced throughout the Hellenic world, trade became markedly more efficient and substantially more profitable for every participant. Merchants could now compute costs and pricing structures with greater facility when engaging with counterparts from other regions. Customers, in turn, could confidently compare offerings from a diverse array of sellers, secure in the knowledge of consistent measurement. Disputes arising from discrepancies in measurement became remarkably less frequent, and consequently, business relationships blossomed into more stable and deeply trusting partnerships. Hermes, in his comprehensive efforts, also ingeniously devised a sophisticated mechanism for resolving commercial disagreements should they regrettably emerge. Rather than permitting conflicts to escalate into protracted and financially burdensome legal skirmishes or, worse, violent altercations, he meticulously cultivated a distinguished cadre of experienced merchants whose sagacity would enable them to serve as impartial arbiters. These esteemed merchant arbitrators were specifically selected for their unblemished reputation for fairness and their profound understanding of the intricate customs and practices inherent to trade. When disputes inevitably arose, both aggrieved parties could willingly agree to present their arguments to an assigned arbitrator who would diligently hear both sides of the contention and then thoughtfully propose an equitable resolution. While the arbitration system was entirely voluntary in its adoption, it rapidly gained immense popularity, primarily because it offered a markedly more expeditious, economical and pragmatic alternative to the often cumbersome formal legal proceedings. Crucially, this innovative system empowered trading partners to reconcile their differences while simultaneously fostering the preservation of their valuable and often long-standing business relationships. As the panorama of Greek commerce continued its impressive expansion under the astute guidance of Hermes, the messenger god began to discern a truly remarkable phenomenon unfolding. The burgeoning volume of trade was not merely augmenting the individual wealth of particular merchants, it was, in fact, catalyzing a pervasive affluence and a wealth of burgeoning prospects across the entire Hellenic social fabric. Farmers, for instance, were accessing novel outlets for their agricultural yields, such as olives, grapes, and grains, a development that spurred them to refine their cultivation methodologies and significantly augment their output. Craftspeople, in turn, were unearthing clientele for bespoke creations and specialized products they had previously been unable to market locally, fostering the acquisition of new proficiencies and the generation of more ingenious designs in pottery, textiles, and metalwork. Even those individuals not directly immersed in mercantile endeavors were reaping advantages from the enhanced assortment of commodities and provisions readily available in their local markets. The introduction of superior infrastructure, particularly the improved roads, coupled with the newfound dependability of commerce, was also facilitating cultural cross-pollination on an unprecedented scale. Individuals traveling for business purposes, journeying across the expanding networks, invariably brought back novel concepts, refined techniques, and fresh perspectives from the diverse locales they visited, enriching the intellectual landscape. Festivals and communal celebrations, once modest, became more magnificent and intricate as communities gained access to exotic resources and merchandise. such as dyes, spices, and foreign artistic elements from distant regions. The dissemination of erudition and ingenuity accelerated dramatically as scholars, artisans, and inventors traversed along the progressively secure and clearly delineated commercial arteries established by Hermes. Zeus, observing all these auspicious transformations, regarded his messenger son's achievements with profound paternal pride. When he convened Hermes to deliberate upon the triumphs of the mercantile enhancements, his unmistakable contentment was palpable. "You have forged a creation that transcends my loftiest expectations when I bestowed upon you the mantle of our celestial envoy," Zeus declared, as they stood together upon a vantage point commanding a view of Athens' bustling agora, teeming with activity. "Your influence extends beyond mere commercial amelioration. You have instrumentalized the genesis of a more interlinked, affluent, and collaborative Hellenic society." Hermes, though experiencing a profound sense of fulfillment from his progenitor's commendation, found his mind already actively contemplating novel strategies to bolster and refine Greek commerce further. "I have been pondering the institution of periodic trade convocations," he reflected aloud, his gaze distant. These would be grand assemblages where purveyors from every corner of the Hellenic realm could convene to exhibit their finest wares, exchange concepts, and forge fresh commercial alliances, fostering unity and prosperity. A gentle smile graced Zeus's countenance, acknowledging his son's inexhaustible inventiveness and drive. "I deem that an exceptionally commendable proposition," he articulated, his voice resonating with approval. "And I harbour a strong suspicion that you will devise methods to render these celebrations not merely prosperous, but truly fabled throughout the ages. Thus, as twilight descends upon the vibrant emporiums of classical Greece, one might envision Hermes still perambulating silently amidst the vendors and patrons, his divine presence a subtle assurance. He would be discreetly safeguarding the equity of each exchange, ensuring the probity of every merchant, and confirming the equitable recompense for every consumer's expenditure. His profound endeavours had fundamentally reshaped not merely the domain of trade, but the very essence and entire character of Hellenic culture, forging bonds and affluence destined to persist and flourish for myriad generations to come. While Hermes had cultivated an esteemed standing across the Hellenic world as a divine patron of wayfarers and an unwavering sentinel of upright trade, a distinct facet of his character manifested itself during more tranquil intervals: his uncontainable fondness for ingenious stratagems and linguistic dexterity. This was not, however, the malevolent prankishness of an entity delighting in inflicting detriment or causing misfortune. Rather, Hermes deployed his cunning faculties to impart profound instruction, to deflate the hubris of the conceited, and occasionally merely to infuse a touch of unforeseen merriment into mundane existence, brightening ordinary days with his wit. During the course of one of his customary dispatches, Hermes stumbled upon a scenario which served as an impeccable exemplification of his singular methodology for engaging with challenging personalities. His errand involved a journey to the affluent polis of Athena, specifically to convey a pronouncement from Poseidon regarding impending meteorological phenomena that would significantly affect both fishing activities and sea travel. The missive was designated for Captain Nicomedes, the chief administrator of the port, who was responsible for orchestrating the operations of Athena's extensive fishing armada. However, a Upon his arrival at the bustling port, Hermes swiftly ascertained that Nicomedes bore the distinction of being, arguably, the most ostentatious and conceited dignitary throughout the entirety of Greece. Hermes located the harbour master presiding grandly within the Port Authority edifice, enveloped by a retinue of junior functionaries who afforded his every utterance an air of theatrical deference. Nicomedes presented as a man of considerable stature, adorned with a meticulously sculpted beard, sumptuous garments befitting his self-importance, and a rhetorical style that unequivocally implied his self-perception of vastly superior consequence compared to any other individual present in the chamber. The affliction plaguing contemporary mariners, Nicomedes was pontificating as Hermes made his ingress, resides in their deficiency of sagacity and practical knowledge, which springs from a genuine comprehension of naval matters. In my formative years, a period I concede to be quite distant, fishermen held in high esteem the acumen of their betters, and assiduously adhered to the counsel emanating from those among us privy to the profound arcana of navigation and maritime law. Hermes received this bombastic discourse with an escalating sense of mirth. It was patently evident that Nicomedes harboured a profound affection for the resonance of his own oratory, seizing every conceivable occasion to underscore his purported mastery and dominion. Advancing with due deference, Hermes articulated, "Pardon me, esteemed sir. I bear a momentous dispatch for harbour master Nicomedes, originating directly from Poseidon himself." Nicomedes instantly assumed a posture of heightened self-importance, signalling to the junior functionaries to recede. "Ah, a celestial communique. I am, unequivocally, Nicomedes, and I stand perpetually prepared to entertain missives from the deities, who, quite naturally, acknowledge my preeminent credentials for the superintendence of nautical concerns. However, rather than proceeding to forthwith convey Poseidon's uncomplicated communique concerning atmospheric conditions, Hermes felt an impulse, sparked by the harbour master's egregious self-assurance, to adopt an alternative tack. In point of fact, Hermes articulated with feigned deliberation. Poseidon was exceedingly precise regarding the mode of this message's conveyance. He stipulated that it should be entrusted solely to the most sagacious and seasoned naval authority in Athena, and he wished for me to confirm I had indeed located the appropriate individual. Nicomedes swelled with self-congratulatory pride. "Why, assuredly, I am that very individual. There exists no soul in Athena, nor indeed across the entirety of Greece, who possesses a more profound grasp of the sea and its meteorological caprices than I. I am thoroughly convinced of that veracity," Hermes concurred with a grave mien. "Nevertheless, Poseidon instructed me to first ascertain your erudition, merely to eliminate any vestige of doubt. He furnished me with a sequence of inquiries pertaining to nautical affairs, and mandated that the message be imparted exclusively to one capable of furnishing accurate responses." The junior functionaries exchanged knowing glances, an intuitive awareness dawning upon them that an intriguing development was imminent. Nicomedes, conversely, was so thoroughly immersed in the certitude of his presumed proficiency that he assented to the examination without hesitation. "Exceedingly well," he proclaimed, with an air of theatricality. "Pose your interrogations. I shall unequivocally manifest the profundity of insight that has garnered me renown across the Grecian archipelagos. Hermes inclined his head with a solemn expression and unfurled a parchment scroll. The inaugural query is, what constitutes the appropriate methodology for securing a fishing vessel with an anchor amidst a tempest, when the prevailing winds emanate from the southeast, yet the ocean swells surge from the northwest? This inquiry, in truth, represented a highly pragmatic challenge that any seasoned port authority ought to have resolved with effortless competence. Nevertheless, Nicomedes had dedicated such an extensive span of years to his bureaucratic responsibilities and the cultivation of his own inflated self-regard that he had become entirely detached from the fundamental exigencies of practical navigation. He prevaricated and equivocated for a brief interlude, then embarked upon an intricate and utterly erroneous exposition, advocating mooring tactics that would have presented perils even in placid conditions, let alone amidst a raging squall. Hermes listened attentively, meticulously inscribing observations upon his scroll. "Fascinating," he uttered. "And the subsequent query is, should the fishing apparatus of one vessel become inextricably intertwined with those of another during the nocturnal hours, what is the established customary procedure for equitably disentangling the predicament?" Once more, this represented foundational knowledge that any port official should have inherently commanded. Yet Nicomedes proffered another convoluted and entirely fallacious rejoinder, one that would have instigated contention and discord rather than fostering reconciliation. As the interrogation progressed, it became progressively manifest to every individual present, save for Nicomedes himself, that the harbour master's practical grasp of nautical realities was astonishingly circumscribed. The junior officials commenced to exhibit signs of mortification on behalf of their superior, whilst Hermes steadfastly preserved his grave demeanour, diligently continuing his detailed annotations. Following the fifth erroneous response, Hermes gently shook his head with a semblance of sorrow. "I regret to inform you that an error appears to have occurred," he declared. "In accordance with Poseidon's explicit directives, my mandate is to locate the most sagacious maritime authority within Athena, and it is abundantly evident that this esteemed individual is not to be found within these chambers." Nicomedes' countenance flushed crimson, a vivid display of both acute embarrassment and simmering indignation. "What precisely do you imply?" he retorted, his voice edged with affront. "I hold the esteemed position of harbour master, a role I have diligently fulfilled for 2 decades. Indeed, 20 years of administrative experience, perhaps." A soft yet resonant voice interjected from the rear of the chamber. All heads turned in unison towards an aged fisherman who had been patiently awaiting his turn to discuss various port-related matters. Addressing Hermes with a respectful yet pointed tone, he continued, "But young man, if your quest is for an individual possessing genuine, hands-on knowledge of vessels and the capricious whims of the weather, you would be wise to consult someone whose livelihood still involves getting his hands wet." The venerable fisherman, known by the name of Demetrios, demonstrated an unparalleled mastery, effortlessly providing the precise answers to all of Hermes' inquiries, and indeed many more beyond. His expertise encompassed an intricate understanding of prevailing wind patterns, sophisticated anchoring techniques, the delicate art of net repair, comprehensive boat maintenance protocols, and the subtle, almost imperceptible indicators that presage shifts in atmospheric conditions. Crucially, Demetrios articulated these complex maritime subjects with the serene, unshakable confidence of one who had devoted a lifetime to learning directly from the vast expanse of the sea, a stark contrast to the bombastic declarations that so frequently characterized Nicomedes' pronouncements. "Ah," Hermes exclaimed, a note of profound satisfaction resonating in his voice. "I believe I have, after all, discovered the truly appropriate individual for this task." He extended Poseidon's urgent missive to the elder fisherman, who meticulously perused its contents, his head nodding in quiet comprehension. "This intelligence is exceedingly valuable," Demetrios affirmed. "A distinct weather pattern is currently coalescing, one that portends the arrival of sudden violent storms over the forthcoming 10-day period. I shall personally ensure that all fishing vessels are duly informed, instructing them to remain proximate to the harbour and to diligently monitor for any cautionary signals." As Demetrios departed with purposeful strides to disseminate the vital meteorological information among his fellow seafarers, Hermes redirected his gaze towards Nicomedes, a gentle, almost benevolent smile playing upon his lips. "You know," he began kindly, his voice imbued with a soft wisdom, "Poseidon also entrusted me with a piece of counsel for you. He suggests that truly sagacious leaders cultivate the habit of listening far more intently than they speak, and that the most effective administrators are those who humbly learn from the individuals who engage in the actual practical labour." The harbour master, utterly disarmed and thoroughly chastened by the recent turn of events, mumbled an indistinct promise about undertaking a comprehensive review of his maritime knowledge and promptly dismissed the assembly. As the other officials quietly filed out of the room, Hermes distinctly overheard their hushed conversations, remarking on how utterly refreshing it had been to witness such a forthright acknowledgment of the old fisherman's profound expertise. This particular brand of subtle yet profoundly impactful stratagem gradually evolved into something of a signature skill for Hermes. He possessed an innate faculty for discerning individuals whose overweening arrogance or profound self-interest inadvertently created difficulties and complications for those around them. Furthermore, he demonstrated an extraordinary capacity to conceive and implement remarkably creative methodologies designed to help these individuals perceive their own problematic behaviors from an entirely fresh and enlightening perspective. Within the ancient city of Thebes, Hermes encountered a wealthy merchant by the name of Apollodorus, a man who had earned a notorious reputation for systematically defrauding his workers of their rightful earnings. Apollodorus would routinely engage labourers for the arduous tasks of loading and unloading his ships, only to subsequently invent spurious pretexts to pay them significantly less than the wages he had initially pledged. Hermes, adopting the guise of a prosperous foreign trader seeking a capable individual to manage a substantial consignment of valuable commodities, approached Apollodorus. He meticulously negotiated a remarkably generous contract for Apollodorus's services, then ingeniously arranged for the merchant himself to undertake the vast majority of the strenuous physical labour, all while Hermes maintained a watchful, supervisory role. As the long, arduous day drew to a close, Hermes began to meticulously enumerate various justifications for reducing Apollodorus's payment. The work, he declared, had regrettably consumed more time than anticipated. A portion of the valuable goods, he asserted, had been handled with an unacceptable degree of roughness, The merchant, he noted with feigned disapproval, had indulged in an excessive number of breaks. By the time Hermes had concluded his systematic list of deductions, Apollodorus found himself receiving merely a paltry fraction of the sum he had been so confidently promised. The infuriated merchant vehemently protested, insisting that such treatment was inherently unfair, that he had toiled with immense diligence and was unequivocally deserving of his full remuneration. It was at this precise juncture that Hermes shed his disguise, revealing his true identity, and calmly pointed out that Apollodorus had just endured the exact experience he routinely inflicted upon his own workforce. "Now you truly comprehend," Hermes stated gently, his voice resonating with an undeniable truth, "how it feels to labour with immense effort and then be unjustly deprived of fair compensation. Perhaps this profound personal experience will serve to guide you in treating your workers with greater equity and justice in the days to come." Phase 2. Apollodorus was so profoundly affected and transformed by this revelatory experience that he not only fundamentally altered his exploitative business practices, but also conscientiously sought out the workers he had previously cheated, diligently paying them every last drachma he owed. However, the mischievous essence of Hermes' trickster nature was not invariably directed towards imparting stern lessons to recalcitrant individuals. On occasion, he deployed his singular cleverness simply to infuse mundane situations with an unexpected surge of spontaneous joy or light-hearted amusement. During a particularly solemn religious festival in Athens, where the elaborate ceremonies had grown so formal and meticulously structured that the populace seemed to have entirely forgotten the inherent joy that was meant to be the very heart of the celebration, Hermes resolved to introduce a delicate touch of whimsical enchantment to the proceedings. He orchestrated for the ceremonial doves, traditionally released during the rituals, to perform an intricate and breathtaking aerial ballet before gracefully ascending into the sky. He caused the temple bells to chime forth in exquisitely harmonious melodies, rather than their customary simple peals. He ingeniously arranged for the offerings of succulent fruit to mysteriously proliferate, ensuring an abundant supply of sustenance to nourish every single attendee of the festival. Most memorably, he subtly manipulated the revered statue of Athena within the temple to appear to nod its divine approval whenever the joyous laughter of children punctuated the ceremonies. This delightful intervention significantly encouraged families to integrate their children more actively and wholeheartedly into the celebration, and consequently the festival triumphantly reclaimed the profound sense of communal joy that had been noticeably absent in recent years. Whispers of these enchanting and delightful tricks spread rapidly throughout Athens, and the citizenry began to anticipate future festivals and ceremonies with a renewed and vibrant enthusiasm, never quite knowing what pleasant and unexpected surprises might lie in wait for them. Hermes' burgeoning reputation as a remarkably clever and profoundly benevolent trickster eventually reached the august assembly of the other deities on Mount Olympus, who, recognizing his unique talents, began to solicit his assistance whenever they found themselves in need of innovative solutions to particularly delicate or intricate problems. When Apollo and Artemis were embroiled in a protracted feud over some trivial disagreement, a dispute that was creating an atmosphere of palpable discomfort for everyone residing on Olympus, Zeus himself implored Hermes to intervene and diplomatically resolve the contentious situation. Hermes ingeniously arranged for both gods to receive identical, anonymously delivered gifts, exquisite lyres that had been meticulously crafted with special strings, designed to produce harmonious sounds only when played in concert with one another. Apollo and Artemis were so utterly enchanted and delighted with their magnificent new instruments that they spontaneously began to collaborate on musical compositions, and their lingering disagreement was swiftly forgotten in the shared rapture of creating beautiful, resonant music together. As the golden hues of evening cascade across the ancient Greek world, one might well envision Hermes settling into some secluded, tranquil alcove, meticulously plotting his next gentle deception or contemplating his subsequent ingenious intervention. His playful pranks and sophisticated wordplay were far more than mere entertainment. They served as potent instruments for subtly shaping the world, rendering it a little wiser, a touch kinder, and undeniably more joyful than it had been prior to his thoughtful manipulations. With the inexorable passage of the seasons, as Hermes' meticulously established network of roadside markers became an integral and deeply embedded feature of daily Greek life, something truly remarkable and profoundly beautiful began to unfold, a development that even the sagacious messenger god himself had not entirely foreseen. The unadorned stone markers he had strategically placed to aid and guide travellers had, in the collective consciousness of the people who utilized them, begun to acquire a far more profound and resonant significance. This nascent transformation commenced with seemingly insignificant expressions of gratitude. A shrewd merchant whose very life had been spared by a timely warning about an ambush of bandits reverently left a modest offering of bread and wine beside the very Hermes stone that had providentially conveyed the crucial information. A grateful family, having found safe refuge during a tempestuous storm thanks to the precise directions meticulously carved upon a marker, returned the following day with freshly gathered wildflowers to tenderly place at its base. These spontaneous, heartfelt acts of thanksgiving, initially isolated incidents, gradually coalesced and solidified into an enduring tradition. Travellers soon began to habitually leave small votive gifts at the Hermes stones, driven not merely by a sense of gratitude for assistance already received, but increasingly as earnest supplications for divine protection and sagacious guidance on the challenging journeys that lay ahead of them. Hermes himself became aware of this evolving tradition during one of his customary inspection tours of the extensive marker network. At a particular stone he had strategically positioned near a treacherous mountain pass, he discovered a small, poignant collection of offerings left behind by passing travellers, a scattering of copper coins, some carefully preserved dried fruit, a diminutive wooden carving depicting a horse, and a handful of freshly picked wildflowers someone had gathered from the roadside. Secured to the stone with a piece of rough cord was a small clay tablet, upon whose surface a message had been painstakingly scratched. "Thank you for keeping my father safe on his journey to Sparta. Please continue to watch over him on his return trip. Alexia of Tegea." Siom. As he read this simple yet profoundly heartfelt message, Hermes experienced a profound warmth blossoming within his chest, a sensation far deeper and more resonant than the customary satisfaction he typically derived from his helpful interventions. A person he had never encountered was placing her trust in him to safeguard her father, and she had taken the considerable effort to articulate her gratitude and heartfelt concern in such a deeply touching manner. As Hermes continued his comprehensive inspection tour, he encountered similar arrays of offerings and heartfelt messages at stone markers distributed throughout his vast network. It became unequivocally clear that people were now perceiving the Hermes stones not solely as sources of practical directional information, but rather as sacred points of palpable connection with the divine protection they fervently hoped would ensure their safety and well-being throughout their arduous journeys. This profound realization ignited a powerful new idea within Hermes, an insight that would irrevocably transform the simple marker stones from mere road signs into something infinitely more meaningful, more potent, and more sacred. Working with meticulous care and unwavering dedication over the ensuing several months, Hermes systematically began the process of converting his most strategically important marker stones into bona fide roadside shrines. He artfully carved small protective niches into the stones, specifically designed for travelers to securely deposit their offerings. He thoughtfully added simple, elevated altar spaces where individuals could perform brief prayers or conduct small personal ceremonies before embarking upon particularly perilous segments of their journeys. Most significantly, he began to dedicate considerable time to personally frequenting these newly established shrines, appearing to travelers who seemed to be in dire need of additional assistance or sagacious guidance. On some occasions he manifested himself in his true, resplendent form as the winged messenger god, offering direct and unmistakable divine assistance to individuals confronting grave and immediate dangers. However, far more frequently he chose to appear disguised as various helpful human characters, an experienced and knowledgeable traveller who could impart invaluable advice about prevailing road conditions, a genial local resident intimately familiar with safe places to establish camp, or a trustworthy merchant capable of recommending honest innkeepers and suppliers offering fair-priced goods. These individual divine interventions became the genesis of innumerable narratives that propagated throughout the entirety of the Greek world. Wayfarers would journey back to their native regions, recounting encounters with enigmatic benefactors who had materialized precisely at the opportune juncture to render the exact assistance required, only to vanish as mysteriously as they had appeared. A characteristic anecdote might unfold thus. A youthful maiden embarking on a solitary pilgrimage to attend her sister's nuptials became disoriented within a perplexing woodland where numerous trails diverged in disparate directions. As dusk began to envelop the landscape and a sense of dread commenced to overwhelm her, she chanced upon a shrine dedicated to Hermes, where she paused to supplicate for divine direction. While she was engaged in prayer, an elderly wanderer approached and extended an invitation to share his encampment for the night. He appeared intimately familiar with the forest's intricacies and reassured her that one particular pathway would conduct her safely to her intended destination should she follow it at the inaugural light of dawn. The venerable man generously shared his provisions with her, regaled her with diverting stories that helped to dissipate her anxieties and ensured she had a comfortable place for repose. In the morning he indicated the correct route, furnished her with explicit instructions to her sister's village, and provided her with supplementary sustenance for the onward journey. When the young woman ultimately reached her destination unscathed and recounted her experience, the populace immediately recognized it as yet another testament to Hermes's protective aegis. The enigmatic yet benevolent stranger, the impeccable timing, and the munificent succor were all hallmarks typical of the messenger god's providential interventions. As news of these extraordinary encounters circulated widely, the roadside sanctuaries dedicated to Hermes progressively transformed into pivotal destinations for travellers across the whole of Greece. Individuals would meticulously plan their itineraries specifically to incorporate stops at prominent Hermes shrines, where they could present votive offerings, solicit divine safeguarding, and occasionally experience direct celestial aid. Furthermore, these shrines evolved into vibrant social gathering points, where wayfarers could converge, exchange vital intelligence, and offer mutual assistance. Given that every individual who paused at a Hermes shrine was, by definition, a traveller in need of protection and guidance, an instantaneous bond of empathy and cooperation naturally formed among those who congregated there. Commercial traders would impart information regarding market conditions in various polis. Pilgrims would exchange counsel concerning the optimal routes to diverse temples and religious festivals. Ordinary households would assist one another with practical dilemmas, such as the repair of carts, navigational directions, and recommendations for suitable lodging establishments. Hermes observed the burgeoning development of these shrine communities with profound satisfaction. His rudimentary marker stones, initially simple boundary indicators, had blossomed into something that was eliciting the finest qualities of human nature: boundless generosity, collaborative spirit, and reciprocal assistance among strangers who shared nothing beyond the common experience of being far from their abodes. The swift-footed deity, however, was not content to merely passively witness this positive evolution. He began actively fostering the establishment of what he termed travellers' guilds, informal associations comprising individuals who regularly traversed particular routes and could therefore furnish succour and pertinent information to less experienced journeyers. A characteristic association of wayfarers might comprise itinerant merchants who routinely plied the route between Athens and Corinth, agriculturalists conveying their produce to markets in various cities, and skilled artisans who travelled to different communities to practice their specialised crafts. Members of the guild would convene periodically at specific sanctuaries designated for Hermes, to share intelligence concerning the state of thoroughfares, prevailing atmospheric conditions, commercial prospects, and conceivable perils. More significantly, guild members pledged their support to any distressed wayfarer whom they encountered, irrespective of whether that individual was a fellow guild member or not. This commitment forged an organic web of reciprocal aid that rendered travel both safer and more agreeable for everyone. The travellers' guilds demonstrated such efficacy that they commenced undertaking further mandates beyond mere road assistance. They initiated the coordination of communal expeditions for individuals apprehensive of solitary travel. They established contingency provision stores at remote shrines where wayfarers could procure food and water during unforeseen delays. They even innovated a nascent financial mechanism that permitted merchants to deposit coinage in one city and withdraw an equivalent value in another, thereby mitigating the inherent perils associated with transporting substantial wealth over extensive journeys. As the network of shrines and travellers' guilds expanded its reach and influence, Hermes realized that he had unwittingly forged a phenomenon that was recalibrating the very essence of Greek civilization. The enhanced security and predictability of passage were fostering unparalleled volumes of commerce, frequent intellectual and artistic interchange, and robust communication between distant communities. Concepts and breakthroughs were disseminating more rapidly than at any previous juncture. Talented artists and scholars were discovering patrons and admirers for their endeavours in locales they had never imagined reaching. Young people were pursuing scholastic endeavours and professional prospects far from their birthplaces. Kinship groups separated by geographical distance were preserving intimate bonds. Of paramount significance, arguably, was the emergent collective ethos that was developing around the Hermes shrines and travellers' guilds, forging more robust ties between the various Greek city-states and communities. Individuals who once identified predominantly by their polis allegiance, whether as Athenians, Spartans, or Corinthians, were now perceiving themselves as integral components of an expansive Hellenic collective, united by shared tenets of hospitality, collaboration, and reciprocal aid. This profound cultural transformation did not escape the notice of the mighty Zeus, who convened his swift-footed progeny to deliberate upon the broader implications of the messenger god's roadside shrine project. "You have indeed wrought something extraordinary," Zeus remarked to his son as they walked together through a verdant garden on Mount Olympus. What commenced as a pragmatic remedy for logistical challenges has transmuted into a potent catalyst for consolidating and reinforcing the whole Hellenic realm. Hermes experienced profound satisfaction from his father's recognition, yet he also pondered the weighty obligations that accompanied his success. "I have been contemplating the perpetuation of this ethos of collaboration and reciprocal support," he articulated. "While the sanctuaries and associations currently operate with efficacy, their enduring vitality hinges upon individuals' voluntary inclination towards beneficence and aid for unknown persons." Zeus affirmed with an assenting inclination of his head. "That is precisely the pertinent inquiry. How might we foster the continuation of these commendable practices, even when such actions demand personal sacrifice or entail considerable expense?" Hermes had been meditating upon this intricate dilemma for a considerable period, and he had formulated concepts he was keen to impart to his father. "I believe the fundamental principle lies in guaranteeing universal dividends from the framework," he stated. "When individuals perceive that their own benevolence towards unknown individuals yields assistance during their own times of need, their propensity to persist in participation is significantly enhanced." This profound understanding would serve as Hermes's compass as he continued to develop and refine the expansive network of roadside shrines and travellers' guilds, perpetually seeking avenues to ensure the enduring viability and widespread utility of the system for everyone involved. With the descent of twilight over the serene sanctuaries dotting the Hellenic thoroughfares, one might envision wayfarers convening around flickering embers, recounting their peregrinations and charting the course for the morrow's expedition, while Hermes, unseen in the penumbra, surveys the scene with deep contentment, cognizant that his unassuming notion for aiding beleaguered households had burgeoned into an influence permeating every recess of the ancient cosmos. As Hermes's renown as the patron of voyagers and sentinel of liminal spaces expanded across the Hellenic lands, the sovereign of Olympus, Zeus, commenced his deliberation on the preparedness of his youthful herald for the gravest and most arduous of all celestial duties. There existed a singular odyssey demanding unparalleled direction, a threshold necessitating the utmost delicacy and empathy in its traversal, and a specific cohort of wayfarers in direst need of a reliable conductor. It was on a tranquil autumnal dusk, when the initial crisp breezes descended from the lofty peaks and the gathering of olives was nearing its conclusion, that Zeus convened Hermes within the magnificent assembly chamber of Mount Olympus for a discourse destined to irrevocably alter the swift-footed deity's celestial portfolio. "Hermes," Zeus commenced, his tone imbued with a solemnity that instantly conveyed to the youthful deity the extraordinary nature of this convocation. "Your endeavours concerning thoroughfares and wayfarers have illuminated a crucial facet of your intrinsic nature. You possess not merely the comprehension of how to direct individuals from one locale to another, but also the sagacity to assist them through the most arduous junctures of their mortal existence." Hermes listened attentively, sensing that his father was building towards something profoundly significant. "There is a type of journey," the Olympian patriarch proceeded, "that demands the most adept and empathetic conductor imaginable. It is an odyssey that each mortal being is destined to undertake eventually, but for which genuine preparation remains an impossibility. It is the ultimate transition from the terrestrial sphere of vitality to the chthonic domain of the departed." A profound gravity descended upon Hermes's being as the full import of Zeus's proposition began to dawn upon him. "For an excessive duration," Zeus explained, "disembodied spirits departing from corporeal existence have been compelled to navigate this arduous metamorphosis, devoid of fitting direction. A segment of these souls finds itself adrift amidst interstitial realms, disoriented and intimidated by the uncharted voyage that looms. Others vehemently oppose this transit, clutching desperately to the existence they forsake, thereby inflicting anguish upon both themselves and those they leave in their wake." Zeus, the sovereign of Olympus, rose from his throne and moved deliberately to a grand window that offered an expansive vista over the verdant Greek countryside, where the nascent twilight was now punctuated by the glimmering lamps of innumerable human habitations. With a voice imbued with gravitas, he declared, "It is my will that you undertake the sacred office of Psychopomp, the venerable guide whose charge it is to assist souls in navigating the profound transition from the living world to the realm of death with inherent dignity, profound peace, and complete understanding." The esteemed role of Psychopomp was, by its very nature, one of the most hallowed responsibilities within the entire divine cosmos. It demanded not merely the inherent faculty to traverse the myriad boundaries separating disparate worlds, but also the profound sagacity to enlighten disoriented and apprehensive spirits on the nature of their momentous passage, coupled with an abiding compassion to assuage their deep-seated fears concerning the uncharted journey that lay before them. Hermes embraced this momentous new commission with the solemnity it unequivocally warranted. Yet he simultaneously infused it with the same inventive ingenuity and thoughtful creativity that had consistently characterized all of his previous divine undertakings. Rather than simply serving as a celestial escort, conveying souls from one plane of existence to another, he embarked upon the development of a comprehensive and nuanced approach designed to aid both those nearing their end and their grieving loved ones in coping with the intricate process of mortality and spiritual transmigration. His initial groundbreaking innovation involved making subtle appearances to mortals in the twilight stages of their lives, frequently assuming the benevolent guise of an unfamiliar yet kind stranger or a solicitous, helpful friend, all with the purpose of gently preparing them for the inevitable voyage ahead. Instead of permitting death to descend upon individuals as a terrifying and abrupt shock, Hermes meticulously helped them to comprehend the unfolding events and to anticipate what they could expect. He might materialize before an aged agriculturalist as a fellow traveller, settling beside the man's deathbed to speak softly of distant, tranquil landscapes and peaceful peregrinations. To a youthful mother confronting life-threatening complications during childbirth, he might manifest as a sagacious midwife, helping her to grasp that, at times, the most profound act of love is the courageous act of relinquishing. For a valorous warrior, gravely wounded in the throes of battle, he could appear as a loyal comrade, speaking eloquently of honour, duty impeccably fulfilled, and the profound serenity that often follows arduous struggle. In each distinct scenario, Hermes meticulously tailored his approach to precisely match the individual person's unique needs, specific fears, and level of comprehension. He maintained unwavering honesty about their impending fate, yet artfully assisted people in perceiving death not as a terrifying finality, but rather as an inherent and natural transition to an altogether different mode of existence. Perhaps even more consequentially, Hermes initiated collaborative endeavours with families, empowering them to provide more efficacious and heartfelt support to their terminally ill relatives. He imparted invaluable guidance on cultivating serene and comforting environments conducive to the dying process, instructing them in the delicate art of conveying meaningful farewells and demonstrating how to relinquish their grasp with profound affection rather than desperate clinging resistance. He illustrated for families how to congregate around their departing kin, not with abject terror and lamentation, but with cherished stories, soothing music, and gentle, affirming conversations that eloquently celebrated the individual's rich existence, thereby ensuring they felt enveloped by warmth and love as they readied themselves for their ultimate voyage. Upon the precise arrival of the moment of death, Hermes would manifest in his authentic, resplendent divine form to personally guide the newly departed soul through the profound transition between the mortal and immortal realms. His majestic presence exuded an unwavering calm and profound reassurance, and his unparalleled understanding of travel and interstitial boundaries rendered him the quintessential guide for this most momentous and pivotal of all journeys. The ethereal path connecting the vibrant world of the living and the solemn realm of the dead was no simple, well-trodden thoroughfare that could be marked with stones or directional signage. It constituted a mysterious and intricate passage that existed partly within the corporeal dimension and partly within realms far beyond the limited grasp of mortal understanding. Souls embarking on this momentous odyssey necessitated a guide who could adeptly assist them in navigating not merely the geographical challenges of the spirit world, but also the profound emotional and spiritual aspects inherent in relinquishing one form of existence and embracing an entirely new one. Hermes soon discerned that numerous souls exhibited a palpable reluctance to complete their journey, primarily due to lingering anxieties regarding the loved ones they were leaving behind in the mortal sphere. A maternal spirit, for instance, might steadfastly refuse to cross into the realm of the deceased, consumed by profound apprehension for her young, vulnerable offspring. An agriculturalist might vehemently resist the final transition, vexed by pressing concerns over who would diligently care for his beloved animals and vital crops. To assuage these profound and understandable worries, Hermes initiated the integration of fleeting, carefully managed sojourns to the world of the living into his comprehensive guidance protocol. He would permit disquieted souls a fleeting glimpse, assuring them that their families were indeed receiving diligent care, that their earthly responsibilities were being competently managed by others, and that their loved ones, though experiencing the pangs of grief, would nevertheless persevere and continue their lives. These brief, poignant observations of ongoing life in the mortal sphere greatly aided souls in detaching from their worldly concerns and completing their journey with a profound sense of inner tranquility and peace of mind. Nevertheless, Hermes exercised meticulous discretion, maintaining these visitations as exceptionally concise and purposefully focused, understanding implicitly that excessive lingering between worlds could prove detrimental to both the departed spirit and the living individuals they had reluctantly left behind. As news of Hermes' profoundly compassionate tutelage and innovative methods permeated throughout the entire Hellenic world, a palpable and transformative shift occurred. Individuals began to shed some of their innate dread and deep-seated fear of mortality and the dying process. Families commenced preparations for life's ultimate chapter with enhanced sagacity and significantly diminished panic. Communities, in turn, began to forge novel rituals and develop customs that eloquently honored the solemn process of dying and vibrantly celebrated the rich existences of those embarking on their final departure. Yet, Hermes's endeavors as psychopomp transcended individual demises, courageously encompassing broader catastrophes that afflicted entire populations with devastating force. When pestilences, widespread armed conflicts, or cataclysmic natural events exacted a heavy toll on life, claiming many lives at once, he would labor indefatigably to guarantee that every single soul received proper and personalized guidance, irrespective of the tumultuous and chaotic circumstances of their passing. During these periods of widespread fatalities and mass casualties, Hermes would meticulously orchestrate the guidance procedure with the identical efficacy and painstaking attention to detail he routinely applied to managing his vast network of terrestrial roadside markers. He would ensure with absolute certainty that no spirit was neglected or left to wander disoriented and confused between realms, and he would liaise seamlessly and effectively with other divine entities to furnish suitable succor and support for the living survivors. A particularly arduous and emotionally taxing dimension of Hermes' responsibilities as psychopomp pertained to those souls whose departure from life occurred amidst profound and overwhelming emotional disquiet. This challenging category included individuals tragically slain in fits of intense anger, those who expired while nurturing deep-seated resentments, or spirits consumed by overwhelming guilt or profound regret at the very moment of their passing. Such souls frequently encountered considerable difficulty in releasing their intense emotional burdens and progressing along their spiritual trajectory. For these vexed and troubled spirits, Hermes devised highly specialized techniques of guidance, meticulously designed to assist them in processing and ultimately releasing their emotional encumbrances prior to completing their transition. He might dedicate extended periods to a single soul, engaging them in deep dialogue, helping them to comprehend the formative events that had shaped their feelings and to discover viable avenues for achieving inner peace regarding their past experiences. Occasionally, this intricate process involved orchestrating brief, carefully managed encounters between the departed soul and living individuals with whom reconciliation was deemed necessary. A son who had perished while estranged from his father, for instance, might be permitted to communicate forgiveness or understanding through symbolic dreams or subtle, meaningful omens. A woman who had passed away burdened by overwhelming guilt might be gently led to perceive that her perceived failings were, in essence, understandable human errors that did not fundamentally define her intrinsic worth as a person. These profound healing interventions demanded immense acumen and acute sensitivity, as Hermes had to meticulously balance the imperative needs of the departed soul with the delicate well-being of the living individuals who might be impacted by supernatural contact with their deceased loved ones. As Hermes steadily accumulated a wealth of experience in his distinguished capacity as psychopomp, he began to discern recurring patterns in how individuals approached death and the act of dying. He noted that those who had cultivated lives marked by munificence, profound empathy, and unyielding integrity generally found the transition significantly less arduous than those whose existences had been characterized by selfishness, cruelty, or deceit, or individuals who had nurtured robust and healthy relationships with kith and kin typically harbored fewer regrets and unresolved concerns prior to their onward journey. This profound observation spurred Hermes to formulate yet another groundbreaking approach to his psychopomp duties. Rather than merely awaiting the advent of actual dying to commence preparing individuals for their ultimate transition, he embarked upon subtly encouraging living mortals to conduct their lives in manners that would render their eventual demise and passage considerably smoother. Through his myriad disguises and interventions within the mortal sphere, Hermes would gently impress upon people the paramount importance of resolving conflicts, articulating affection, and treating others with inherent kindness and respect. He would facilitate a deeper understanding that the very fabric and quality of their lives would profoundly influence their experience when the inexorable moment arrived to relinquish those lives. This forward-thinking and proactive methodology for death preparation yielded profound and far-reaching consequences across Greek society. People initiated a more earnest and conscientious engagement with their interpersonal relationships, dedicating greater effort to resolving disputes and mending old grievances. Communities in response developed more robust support frameworks for the comprehensive care of the elderly, the infirm, and the dying. Concurrently, philosophical deliberations concerning the fundamental meaning of life and death became both more prevalent and more deeply considered and thoughtful. The entire pantheon of deities dwelling upon the majestic Mount Olympus observed Hermes' dedicated and transformative service as psychopomp with profound deference and unreserved admiration. Hades, the formidable sovereign of the underworld, evinced particular appreciation for Hermes' singular adeptness in ensuring souls arrived in the realm of the deceased in a state of tranquility and acceptance, rather than paralyzing fear and staunch resistance. Your sagacious guidance significantly alleviates the complexities of my duties, Hades conveyed to Hermes during one of their customary consultations regarding transitioning souls. When individuals arrive here already possessing an intrinsic understanding and acceptance of their new circumstances, they assimilate far more rapidly and harmoniously into their altered existence. Even Athena, the revered goddess of strategic wisdom, lauded Hermes' pioneering methodologies in guiding the dying. You have masterfully transmuted the act of dying from a process fraught with terror and disorientation into a fertile opportunity for personal evolution, profound reconciliation, and spiritual maturation, she astutely remarked. That, indeed, exemplifies true wisdom in practical application. As the years progressed and Hermes continued his sacred work as psychopomp, he developed an ever deeper understanding of the profound interconnections among his various divine responsibilities. His dominion over roads and travel had profoundly instilled in him the critical importance of secure passage and reliable guidance for all wayfarers. His meticulous oversight of commerce had distinctly illuminated the enduring value of equitable dealings and the fundamental bedrock of mutual trust. Furthermore, his renowned role as trickster had powerfully demonstrated the inherent efficacy of wisdom and creative ingenuity in resolving intricate problems. All these finely honed skills and perceptive insights proved utterly indispensable in his overarching function as a guide between worlds. Death, he came to recognize with absolute clarity, was simply the ultimate journey, the final boundary crossing and the most momentous transition any individual soul would ever make. And much like all significant expeditions, its passage was invariably rendered far more smoothly when the traveller was accompanied by a knowledgeable, trustworthy, and deeply compassionate guide. As twilight deepened over the venerable ancient Greek world and families converged around their hearth fires to recount daily experiences and anticipate tranquil repose, one could readily envision Hermes. He would be moving within the encompassing darkness, guiding a spirit undertaking its gentle transition from one existence to the next. His very presence provided an invaluable fount of solace and unerring direction during that profound, mysterious passage which all souls are ultimately destined to traverse.